Hello, you're listening to a Talking Spirit Animecast. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined here with Chris.
Yo.
And today's episode is the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation podcast. The Jobless Cast. I don't know what you want to call it. Gotta have something really cool for it. I don't know. Of course, I've been covering Mushoku Tensei on an episode-by-episode basis, doing videos, impressions, my thoughts on each episode. And the one thing I've run into way too much is they talked about it in episode 8. They talked about it in episode 6. I apparently have the worst memory possible, so big shocker to many people, I'm sure, but I decided...
At least you have a little bit better memory than me.
Are you sure?
No, I don't. I don't even remember what we just said, so...
What are we talking about?
I don't know.
Is this a discussional podcast episode? Oh, we're doing Fairycast.
Is it a Fairycast?
Yeah.
Or is it Jobless Reincarnation?
I think it's Fairycast. But yeah.
So you have Jobless Reincarnation pictures up here, so I'm going to assume that we're talking about Jobless Reincarnation.
Maybe there's a fairy tale crossover happening.
That's possible.
Come on, Chris. You never know. I mean, they have that whole side Eden Zero thing that we haven't watched yet that apparently does crossovers for fairy tale. I don't know. But anyways, because of that, I decided to go back and restart watching the series from the first episode just to see what I might have missed and to kind of refresh my memory because obviously I have terrible memory. I mean, to example, and this is like full-on spoilers for Mushoku Tensei, by the way. We're not doing anything light novel based. We're just specifically the show, what's been adapted. So if you have not watched all the way up until episode 18 or part 2, episode 7, because I don't know why everybody has to list this stuff differently. I always love when I'm watching a series and I have to note part 2, episode this, and the full count of episodes because I don't know what people want to go by. But anyways, but yeah, full on spoilers for all that stuff. But yeah, specifically one thing I remember was I totally forgot that at Roxy's homeland, they all talked telepathy. And I don't even remember them mentioning that when they first visited with Rudy. But then when I rewatched it, of course, yeah, when they first arrive and Rowan's just standing at the gates and they're like going, what is he doing? Oh, he's talking to the chief. They use telepathy. Totally forgot that. So when Roxy's episode came and she's having this whole issue, I'm like, oh, okay, that was technically mentioned. I mean, there's several cases like that. I mean, it's really hard for me to remember the ranking system. And then come to find out when I rewatched it, the ranking system is mentioned differently than what they mentioned throughout the rest of the series. So it's like translation issues, I guess, and how they want to define each rank, like, king or versus royalty or imperial. It's... Anyways, so re-equating myself with that. I mean, the other thing I noticed that I don't think I noticed the first time was they technically, it's not confirmed yet. They haven't specifically mentioned it, but they're technically heavily implying that Ghislaine has a demon eye, which it didn't even dawn on me until I rewatched it because technically now I have the perspective of who Kishirika is, that Ghislaine, pulling up her eye patch and her eyes showing right after showing Kishirika walking in the middle of nowhere with nobody. It technically implies that. It's thoroughly saying, look at this, but you don't know until you find out who this demon empress is. So it's stuff like that Nokopara, I keep wanting to say Nekopara every time I see his name. Nokopara and his involvement with Roxy is like, okay, that's really cool. I totally forgot about Lilia and the fact that she essentially devoted her daughter to be a servant of Rudy. Totally forgot that whole ordeal. It's a lot of cool little things that I noted coming back into it with, this perspective of everything that comes. Geese. I never knew that they were completely implying that he was a part of Paul's team way back a long time ago, because of course it was just a silhouette when they first revealed them, when Ghislaine was talking about the party of 6.
Right.
It was a silhouette, and he was a thief. But now that you know what he looks like, yeah, that silhouette kind of looks like him. It's that kind of cool stuff that I noticed going back through it.
Yeah, there's hints that is also kind of dropped because of the stuff that is kind of cut from the light novel to the anime adaptation.
Okay, this is the thing I want to make sure we establish right off the bat. Chris likes to watch videos of what's cut from light novels. I don't like that because I know that eventually they could get into that stuff. If Chris mentions anything that I don't know, I'm going to cut it from the podcast. So no worries there. I don't know why he watched that stuff, especially when we have to talk about this stuff, but he does. So I'm going to put a big warning to Chris. Don't bring that stuff up. I don't want to know what that stuff is, and I know it's technically not spoiler because it should have been adapted, but I don't want to put something in here that could end up coming up later.
I haven't watched that much of it. I specifically ignored there was that entire thing that they just literally revealed with Roxy of why she left her town. That was all. So to go to what Andrew is talking about, yes, some of the stuff does actually get cut or covered.
And they technically have an OVA that's coming out for the Blu-ray that I just made a video on, which they're technically going to get into what happened with Eris the entire time Rudy was with Paul. Eventually gets adapted. They did commit to adapt everything. So if something's cut, they're going to get to it.
All I was going to talk about was the fact that some of the stuff that is cut is actually helpful to the show. We've talked about several times how it feels like there's a lot in each one of these episodes.
So much.
And it feels naturally paced. It doesn't feel like it's accelerated. Sometimes when shows do some accelerated pace, it literally feels rushed. This doesn't feel rushed.
Spirit Chronicles.
That's all I was really going to point out was that some of the stuff, like we've talked about several times, where it sucks that we don't get the internal dialogue. Some of the internal dialogue that seems to be getting cut is just useless banter involved with Rudy and his kind of his more lecherous nature tends to be a lot more forthright in a lot of cases. So that's most of the stuff that gets cut. But some of the stuff is usually just more along the lines of just character building that, yes, it could be construed as necessary, but at the same time it's not. And Geese is one of those cases where it goes a lot more in depth into his why he has certain proclivities towards Eris and Rudy, and what decisions he makes involving that. So
that was one of the funny things I noticed going through a rewatch was like, now that I know who Geese is, it's like, why is he just watching? And I mean, the obvious answer is that he is allowing Rudy to make his decisions. He's not, when Gallus shows up, it's like, well, Geese could probably have just knocked him out real quick. But at the same time, I don't know how high-ranking Geese is. Geese could have been their weakest of their team. He was just very useful because he was a thief. His skills could have been useful for, removing traps or something like that. I'm not sure exactly the entirety of what the thieves do, but he could be useful in other ways than just combat. So maybe Gallus in front of him, he was a Saint North God, I believe, swordsman. He could have been like, dude, this guy's going to wreck me if I try to fight him. He does help in the end because he does blind Gallus, and that allows, Rudy to take him out. But I think a lot of that was just him kind of constantly going, what are you going to do, dude? What are you going to do, dude? Are you going to help them? Why would you help them? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Oh, man, this is dangerous. This guy's really powerful. What are you going to do? He was constantly allowing Rudy, because he knew who Rudy was. The moment that Rudy said what his name was, he's like, oh, that name sounds familiar. I think at some point he did connect that, oh, this is Paul's son. Well, let me see what Paul's son will do. Let me allow him to make his own journey. And I think that was cool in the end, so. But we'll eventually get to all this stuff.
Now, out of curiosity, see, I just did pretty much a watch through of at least the first season of your kind of impressions, just to kind of refresh myself, and so I caught some of the stuff, but a lot of one thing I am kind of jealous of Andrew is him being able to watch through a lot of these and seeing it from that perspective. It really kind of sucks. I had other shows that I wanted to catch up on, and so one of the things that you did point out in regards to the demon eye that Ghislaine has, you also mentioned the fact that she said that she was a North in that with the masked guy, when they fought over the thing in the sky, you mentioned that she had said that she was a North sword lord. Did they actually dig into that, or because we had mentioned the idea?
She says specifically when he appears, he's saying that Rudy is not involved with this. And the way that she basically puts her honor before, because she knows that Goose is an important person. Right. So a servant of him with a decree to do something, she obviously either has to fight back against him. This is all assumption based on what happens. She either has to fight back against him, which obviously is going to be dangerous, or she can basically proclaim to him, I will put everything of me at stake, my honor and my leaders, and my sensei's honor, on the fact that he is not involved. And he accepts that because of who she notes she's putting his name on the line. And so basically she says, swears by her teacher, the sword god Galfarion, which I'm assuming is the guy with the mark that took her from her hometown. It's my assumption right now, because I don't know who the heck that is. Mm-hmm. I was kind of wondering, would it be Ruijerd? No, because he has a scar under one of his eyes, and Ruijerd has it across his entire nose. And it can't be Paul, because Paul doesn't really have any facial disfigurements, so I don't think it would be him anyway, because he would have to be very young at that point, because they're about the same age. But yeah, to her sensei.
Well, and he's never been to the Demon Continent either.
Right, that too. That is a very good point. They specifically point that out with Geese saying, you've never been here before, you don't know how tough it is. You're from that central continent. You nice, relaxing central continent. It's much different down here kind of thing, or over here, depending on where you're looking at the map. But yeah, she swears upon the sword god Galfarion and the honor of Dahlia. So that's all she really mentions there. But yes, technically, at some point when they're mentioning how good Ghislaine has become for the sword, to Geese, her brother, they mentioned that, yeah, she became a sword king.
Okay.
We're going to start from episode 1. I'm going to kind of note some of my observations and kind of give a run through so we can kind of refresh things. And so Chris can get a refresher. So Chris gets to knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. He doesn't have to rewatch everything. He just gets to sit down here and talk about everything that happens. But yeah, we got to kind of give a full, this again, starting from the very beginning, full on spoilers for the entire series. I guess if are you still watching it or listening to this point, you've been spoiled plenty of stuff. But opens up with this guy in his previous... They never mention what his name was in the previous world, which I don't think it really matters, but we'll just say his name is Rudy in his previous world. So we kind of follow that Rudy was at some point bullied by his classmates. He was chunky, he's big guy, stripped down naked, humiliated many times, strung up on a gate at some point and had pictures taken of him. They mentioned at some point when he was first becoming a NEET, kind of locking himself up after the bullying. Yeah, at some point he gets kicked out of his home because whoever is taking care of him finally passes away, and I'm guessing siblings of those people decide to kick him out of the house and tell him to get a job, whatever. So as he's walking down the street, ends up seeing some school kids, 3 kids on the side of the street that are going to get hit by a truck. He rushes out to try to save them and gets hit. Appears into another world, which is in the, what was the village called? Buena? Is it Buena Village? So he's kind of transported there, reborn in this world, being taken care of by both Zenith and Paul. So their child. Really quickly realizes, man, this is a different world. Looks very European. Not sure why he's here. Different language. He kind of picks up the language very quickly, so that wasn't too much of an issue for him. Said he took 6 months in order to get used to the language. But yeah, no gas, no electric. Finally noticed that there's swordsmen because his father is a swordsman. Mother has magic. Notices that there's magic in this world, and that's when he starts getting interested in magic, which he starts to train it and try to learn it. The interesting thing that I noticed from the whole magic situation is I forgot that they really kind of got heavy into incantations versus magic circles. So apparently there's 2 different types of magic, incantations and magic circles. I don't think we've ever seen anybody use a magic circle. I wonder if you could probably...
No, it was implied that it was a magic circle that was holding the divine beast down.
Yeah, that looked like a magic circle. That could have been. It kind of, that orb was kind of involved with it, so I guess that's true. But yeah, it basically talks about the fact that the incantations are something that's come popular. It's popularized in society that most people choose to do incantations instead of magic circles, which, again, I think kind of makes sense because of the work that's involved in making a magic circle. But I'm curious if at some point they may imply that magic circles are more powerful. It's just they're clunky.
Right. It's
too much work. That would make sense of why you would use one for, holding down a sacred beast, because it's not like they're going anywhere, so you can create it and sit them in it. But, yeah, they kind of note the fact that how incantations work. He kind of specifies that over time he's trying to use it, and it just seems to just plop down. Eventually realizes that there's a kind of a stream, and that stream needs to be set to how you want it. The first part of the incantation is creation of it. There's a set size, set firing speed, and then the activation point. So he kind of changing the range obviously makes Torque can actually go somewhere. So that was cool. Eventually he blows a hole in the wall, kind of builds up his mana pool too. And that's the point in which they hire Roxy. So yay, Roxy appears. I'm so happy to get a Roxy episode recently. But yeah, we find out at this point that obviously Roxy's been hired. We find out that why Paul has money to hire a tutor, and that's because he's a knight of the village, and he basically serves as the protection for the village because they have a lot of monsters and stuff. I like that. I especially liked. I think the reason why I enjoyed Roxy so much early on was just the introduction, because she shows up. Obviously, they're making fun of the fact that she looks so young and she's so small and everything. And I like the way that he describes her in their first meeting was lolly, scornful gaze, unsociable, 3 traits that equal perfection. I want to marry her. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we get the Ponsu shot later on for her as their. And that was interesting because, again, this is one of those aspects of utilizing technically ecchi to establish something. And obviously he didn't know early on if the idea of not using incantations or speaking them was taboo. So obviously he's in this new world. He doesn't know really what people accept and don't accept. And so when he's reading about the fact that you have to do this in order to use a spell, obviously the fear comes that if I don't do that, because I cannot do that, is it seen as bad? Is there a reason why they don't say to do that? So he's afraid of letting Roxy know that he doesn't have to use incantations. So when he first starts training with her, or at least practicing initially, he speaks it out because he doesn't want to reveal to her that he technically doesn't have to use incantations. And so obviously the way that she finds out that he doesn't have to is because her skirt flies up and he stops midway, but it still goes off, thus revealing to her, wait, you flowed that in and it still went off. I was like, yeah, I don't have to use incantations. So it was kind of funny to have, again, early on when I was watching the series, that didn't really kind of dawn on me how important that technically was, but there's a lot of things that he doesn't really know if are taboos or not, and what he's trying to avoid, not to reveal too much to people to obviously out him, which obviously is an ongoing issue for him personally because he's always afraid of, I guess, bringing too much attention to himself because he already has his issues with people. He already has social issues, and obviously this entire first few episodes is hitting heavy on the idea that he doesn't want to leave his house, he doesn't want to go out. Obviously when she wants to train with him, he's like, can we do it inside? No, we can't really do it inside. Okay, that kind of stuff. We also get the revelation of different types of magic. Obviously, there's attack magic, heal magic, and summon magic. I don't think we've necessarily seen any summon magic except for what is implied to be a part of the mana disaster. At least one of the people that is shown during the time where this is building up says that looks like a summon circle. That looks like some sort of summon spell. I think it was it was either Pelagus or the guy that was on the hill with the dragon. One of the two of them mentions that it looks similar to a summon magic. No, I think it was the guy on the hill with the dragon that said that. And I think Pelagus was specifically saying that they could be trying to break the seal that was on Laplace. Something like that. Or maybe it was both. I don't know. I forget that part. Yeah, they destroy the tree, making Mom mad. But yeah, the other thing that reveal is that their magic is divided into different ranks, 7 total ranks. And this is where I said I think I don't know if it's different for magic than swordsmanship or weapon skills. Because when they initially say the ranks, or at least Roxy does, she says beginner, intermediate, advanced, sacred, royal, imperial, and divine. And that's kind of counter to what we kind of find out later, which there's a saint rank, there's a king rank, and I'd assume that king is a part of royal and that saint's a part of sacred.
Probably.
That's where it kind of gets weird. And I think I don't know if there's, and this is the confusing part of the rank system. I mean, you could probably get into this point. It really annoys me when you're hearing people talk about different things, because what's the weapon? The swords ones. There's like sword god, there's north god, but is divine also referenced as god? So that's where it gets confusing, because sometimes I don't know if they're talking about their style or their rank. So hopefully there's not a god rank north god and it's just, again, specifically divine. But I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to see. But yeah, that's where we get into the whole training session with Roxy. They go through 6 months of training before he's able to use intermediate without problem. We get into talking about the superbs. So, getting the whole explanation and the fear of superbs. Obviously, Roxy mentions the idea that she's technically of demon races, because obviously we'll find out later that she's from the demon continent, and it's because of her hair is something that really kind of defines that. So it gets heavy in the idea that possibly Roxy was facing discrimination based on her hair color. She mentions that, obviously your parents were a little shocked to see me. It was probably because of my hair color. I mean, I would probably argue that it's probably because of her age look, more so that. I don't think they ever confirm or deny one way or the other. Obviously, her parents love her in the end, so it doesn't really matter. But they do mention the idea, like, when Rudy finally goes out with Roxy to go for his final exam, this is his first time leaving the house and his yard and everything. And he's shocked by the fact that this girl, in a span of 2 years, has gained so much love of the village, because even despite the fact that she probably faced discrimination because of the fact that she's of a demon race. So, interesting stuff there. But yeah, we did in superbs. Apparently, 4 to 5 centuries ago, a big war happened between the humans and the demons called the Laplace War, and the superbs went berserk and killed many allies and foes alike, including women and children, their own women and children. So, after the war, they were driven from the demon continent, which I think that's really kind of speculation, because I don't necessarily think that it's true, because I think they mentioned the fact that they believe that Ruijerd is the final of the superbs. No, I think he mentioned that he's trying to clean it.
Even you mentioned that there was a implication. No,
because obviously there's this idea that Sylphy might be one, because they're afraid of her for her green hair. But I don't necessarily think that I don't know that they think that she is one, because obviously she's an elf.
I think that you implied that you thought possibly that we would end up getting into it, and I would kind of agree with you that it's obviously implied that at some point there's going to be they're going to bump into another superb that is obviously not with his own faculties, because you were talking about the idea that even Ruijerd mentions that not all of us are going to be have our curse broken. Some of us will not have our curse broken. Now,
yeah, it depends on if they have the spear or not. The spear that was given to them by Laplace.
Right, and now on the same token, he kind of made it sound like, if I remember right, and this has been a long time, it seems like he was talking about how he had gotten into a battle with several of them or something like that, and he was basically the last one standing, per se, and so he was able to break his curse or something. I don't know. Like I said, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, he carries a spear that was of his son, because the spears are their souls or whatever, and he claims that his son was the one that broke his curse, basically. I don't think they've actually necessarily gotten into exactly how that happened. Is it because he sacrificed himself and that broke the curse from Ruijerd, thinking, okay, I just killed my son, and it snapped him out of it, or something like that? It doesn't really imply. It just basically says, this is the spear of my son. He's the one that broke my curse.
Maybe carrying a spear, another superb's spear breaks the curse. If you carry your own spear, then that keeps your curse with you. Who knows?
Well, he implies that the spear is of themselves. So the spear is their soul or whatever. So they never let their spear go. And the issue came when Laplace came to them and gave them spears. He believes these spears were cursed, and it just drove them mad to the point where they wanted to kill everything. These spears would never break. They were super strong, and they never let that spear go. So it's one of those things where I think eventually they'll probably explain it more. I'm sure probably we'll get maybe a full-on backstory of everything that happened with Laplace, and I think that's going to be fantastic. I'm actually looking forward to, I guess, finally getting a full story of Laplace versus, obviously, Peregus, who they claim defeated him It's one of those things where it's like, this is the story that is told, but at the same time, I don't know, because obviously you do know based on Ruijerd's story that it's not the full story. What everybody knows about the Superbs is not, it's technically true, but people don't know that Laplace tricked them. And that's the full story that we get from Ruijerd. So I'm curious at one point, maybe that little bit more information will reveal exactly what happened. What was, if Laplace maybe had been a good guy in the end.
And what this is actually one of those. This is a hat tip to the actual writer, where it's nice to have a writer that I actually trust. I trust that he's going to get into this at some point. These are important things that we want to know about the story, or about the world, and we actually trust that this writer will actually get into that at some point.
Eventually, we get to learn about the Renoa University of Magic, because this is the point which I think Roxy starts realizing Rudy's like really good at this stuff, so I don't think I'm going to be able to train him much. She kind of starts having a little bit doubt in her own abilities. So eventually we find out that yes, they in this world they do have birth dates, but they are one every 5 years. So you don't celebrate on a yearly basis. You only celebrate on the 5-year pinnacle points of your life. And so obviously Roxy is becoming the age of 15, which they also mention the idea that is the point in which she become an adult. And so they have a little celebration for her, which is great.
Roxy is turning 15.
Oh, yeah, that would be 40?
It would have to have been 40, because later on in the story, they
like 40,
point out
42 or something like that later on.
Later on, they mentioned, I thought you said 44.
I was thinking of Rudy at the time. My brain was going Rudy route. So I know that he eventually has his tenure later on in the show. But anyways, they have a little celebration for her. Eventually, they do the graduation exam, which again is this point in which we start seeing Rudy with his anxieties again going out into the world. Obviously, the last time Rudy was in the previous world, he had just left this place that he was stuck in for, I think he said 20 years that he was a NEET, and he was kicked out of his home, and that's when he gets hit by a truck. So even still then, this brief moment he was out of his home, he never really leaves his home. And the point in which he rebirths in this world, he's kind of stuck in his home, goes in the yard every now and then when Roxy's training him. So leaving out into the village is an extreme point of anxiety for him. I think most people that have had this issue before, you'll probably note that's just something that's hard to get over, that boundary that you step past. And yes, Roxy kind of instills upon him a little bit of bravery for him to go out. And then again, he realizes, watching her communicate with a lot of people in the village, he realized this girl that has a lot of obvious discrimination towards because of her race, and she's able to pull it off. It kind of gives him a little bit of comfort, I guess, in the end. But yeah, they go out into the middle of nowhere. He knows the fact, like, why are we going out here? He's like, well, this is a very powerful ability. I don't want to harm any of the crops or the people. She's going to use a saint level magic, and she claims that she can only do it once. So that kind of, I guess, notates how much mana that takes, or possibly there's her skill of using a saint magic power, a saint ability, I guess, saint level ability. She used the ability. Obviously, Rudy comes up behind her and apparently does it better, because that frustrates her. She's like, I told you to use the ability. You didn't have to make it a bigger one or something like that. But this is the point in which he's able to actually use a saint level magic ability. So that thus, I guess, decrees him as being a saint level mage. So, or at least level water mage. I think, because they specifically kind of equate things of a certain element. Obviously, Roxy, I think later on in the show, is known as a king rank water mage. So specifically here, he's a saint level water mage, not necessarily everything mage. So I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know, they've gotten to the elements, right? Like what all elements are there? I don't remember. It's like I keep thinking of moments where there's like them going over all the elements, but at the same time, I think that's from other shows.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever actually.
I mean, he's used water. He's used earth a lot. He uses earth a lot to either turn stuff into mud, which could be water as well, I guess. But he's created pillars to block things or block people, so he used that a lot. He's used fire. Yeah,
but they haven't actually implied his ranking on any of them.
Just water.
Just water.
Right here is where they specifically say he's a saint water mage. But yeah,
And even Roxy's been specifically stuck with water, and I think I've seen her use ice as well, which technically is a little is a side thing to water. So it's not like just because she used ice that doesn't necessarily mean that she's some kind of an ice mage.
Yeah, that could be a branch of that. That's like I said, I don't think they've really necessarily sat down. And it's surprising because they did go in quite a bit of, at least the ranks and what different types. She's obviously used healing spells. I don't know if healing is a branch of healing or of water. I know that some storytelling has equated water. No, they usually equate earth with healing.
And in all actuality, Eris was using fire in one of their training sessions.
Yeah, he's trained Eris and Ghislaine in fire. I don't know that he's taught them anything else, because I think all the training sessions they showed was this them specifically creating fire. So that's another interesting thing. But yeah, so he's a saint mage now. All that's good, and then unfortunately, like most of us had to deal with, very sadly, Roxy leaves. She's pretty much trained him everything that she can, and she doesn't really feel like she can do anymore. And I think this was kind of an implied element of boosting Roxy's desire to learn more, because she's seen how well Rudy adapted and learned and grew, and I think this is a pushing point for her to actually want to grow stronger. And I've always actually liked that about the series, of this sense of a rivalry between Rudy and Roxy, because it implies that they're constantly trying to... Not they're trying to run up. It's not a Western rivalry. It's definitely a Japanese rivalry where they don't want to one-up each other, but they're trying to grow because the other is growing. And we kind of see that in some of the letters being sent, especially one of the first letters that Rudy gets from Roxy as she goes to this other kingdom to train this prince. It implies that she says something effective when she got there. She's finally gained the rank of King of Water Mage. And she's like, knowing you're probably, what was it? What was the one above that? Imperial or something like that. You're probably Imperial rank by this point, which I think is, it's one up from it. So it's King rank, and then it goes to Imperial. And so I think she says something like Emperor, which again is technically a spinoff of Imperial. So she's already thinking that he's already Imperial. Like, yeah, you're doing so well, you're probably Imperial. And this actually seems like it kind of rubs him the wrong way. Like, I got to get better for Roxy. Roxy has an expectation for me, so I need to get better. And so I kind of like that. And it kind of does suck that you never really have, and it makes sense why you don't have these moments where it goes, Rudy then became this rank, or Rudy then became this rank. There's not really a point beyond the moment where he gets teleported that he really has a moment to like sit down and go to like, I don't know where you would go to, I guess, dictate what your level is. My assumption is that your level is based on the spells that you can do of a certain rank. Because again, when she has him do his test, what does he do? He uses a saint level magic ability. And boom, she's like, you're now a saint level water mage. So I think it's really probably implied based on what you can use, what skill level of abilities you can use. But then again, that makes me wonder, and again, this is probably something I'll eventually get into more. How does that work for like a sword god? Is there like they mentioned one of the sword skill styles can throw weapons, because that's the guy that was kidnapping Eris. He threw his weapon. He's like, that guy's not throwing out of desperation. He's this style. Paul told me that style throws their weapon. He's probably aiming to kill me. So maybe specifically a type of throw is a certain skill level or something. It's interesting. I'm curious if eventually that we'll get into maybe, and that's the thing. Would you want that? Would you want it to so plainly have to point out to you every 2 minutes, like, he leveled up? He leveled up.
Well, no,
he leveled up.
I wouldn't.
It's
want that,
cool when you find out.
Yeah, I do. And again, this goes back to my trust of the author. I don't sit here and worry about the fact that that they're going to do some kind of, because what came to mind on the whole, they haven't really shown kind of a power level thing as far as the fighting styles. In actuality, they kind of did. That was what they were doing on the way to the city in this, the episode before last, where they had all these random people. I've trained under such and such sword god. And,
yes, I'm the pupil of this royal person.
and nobody could stand up against Ruijerd. So that was an obvious comment to the idea of, yeah, he's technically really powerful. It'll be interesting to see if Ghislaine goes up against Ruijerd. That would be kind of a not to mention it would be a freaking awesome fight, but
it would have been cool to see Paul and Ruijerd duel. I mean, obviously Paul had respect for Ruijerd because obviously he knows that he's a good person. He saved his son, but I kind of wish that you'd kind of seen them go head to head. I think that's one of those things where they don't really want to reveal that too quickly, like just how strong Ruijerd is. It seems like they're really trying to keep this perspective that Ruijerd is this immovable object, and I just know the writer's waiting for that moment that he just has him go up against somebody, and they go, yeah, this person, he is the power setter, like he is the power level setter. So the moment you see Ruijerd fall to somebody, you're like, this person's dangerous. Like, this is serious. And they kind of flagged that with the whole, when they were traveling to Millis, and they were mentioning the seven sacred skilled or whatever. It's like this ranking system. And there was this monument to these top 7. I think it was top 7. And literally Ruijerd's like, yeah, I don't think I'd be able to beat them. And so Rudy's like, yeah, I think we'll probably avoid those people then, because if Ruijerd can't beat them, we'd probably dead. And I'm like, you're flagging yourself. I know that we're gonna run into somebody here soon because you just flagged it. You had to flag it.
Also, on a side note, you were mentioning the whole idea of the rivalries. He does that a lot with a lot of characters. It's not just Roxy. He did that with, technically he's done that with Eris as well. He built kind of a rivalry-ish thing going on with her.
Technically in sword skill, yes.
Yeah, she acknowledges him, and so she's constantly trying to better herself.
And then he has to use his eyes to beat her.
And he uses his eyes, and that threw everything off. So he's actually...
That was a facepalm moment.
He's technically doing that with a lot of characters. It'll be interesting to see if they kind of show that with Sylphy as well at some point, where... when they actually finally bring her in, which at this point I'm wondering if they'll ever bring her back. If that's what they'll do with her, is they'll reveal her, and it'll do some kind of a backstory where she turns around and she says, "No, you did this at this point, and that caused me to want." Probably her becoming more of a person in general.
That was,
and then as well as because she's just all heart. And what was his thing while he was interacting with her was him going past himself and becoming more of a person. And it would be the similar thing where she is going past herself and actually working with people to actually interact with them instead of just shutting herself off, which is what she was technically doing at that point, even though it was everybody else was attacking her, and she felt the best way was to just cut herself off from those.
Yeah, that was a cool thing. Again, another thing that I don't know if I forgot it or just didn't pay attention enough, but it was really cool to remember that there was so much emphasis given on how she's grown since he was gone. Because the only other brief moment we get with Sylphy once Rudy leaves to go train Eris, the only sight that we get of her is this brief moment just before the mana disaster happens. We get this and again, this is one of those ones that I forgot that actually happened. We get this brief moment where she comes to visit Paul and everybody else. Paul just gets back from going out and killing all these monsters. It's the reason why Paul didn't get to make it to Rudy's 10th birthday, was because he was fighting this increased amount of monsters showing up in the village because of this mana disaster that was building up. And this brief shot that we get, Paul just comes back home. Obviously, Norn, Aisha, Zenith are all there. And Sylphy comes in because she wants to give Lilia this pendant that she made for Rudy for his 10th birthday. Because they all can't go there. So she made a gift that they can send to him. And when she arrives in the home, gives it to Lilia, they kind of mention, Zenith is talking to Lilia and is like, I'm so glad she's got over it. And she's like, yeah. The moment that she found out that Rudy had left, she kind of started acting out. But they said it was a good thing because she's not bullied anymore. So they were implying that the moment that Rudy left, she became like a delinquent and started fighting back against all these bullies, and in a sense got stronger because she fought back and protected herself. And now she's at the point now where she's very happy because she's not being bullied anymore. She's seen as strong, and people avoid, confrontations with her. And I think that's helped her develop. And it was kind of the thing that, Paul was suggesting when he sent off Rudy, was you're becoming too reliant on Sylphy. You're relying on her too much. And I think he also mentioned the idea that she's probably relying on him. And I think maybe it was Rudy that said that Sylphy's relying on him too much, and she might get stronger by him not being there. And it definitely implies that the moment that we see Sylphy show up at the house right there, that she's much happier. She's much more forward. She's like, just runs out there. She's not shy. She doesn't walk up to the house like, hi, how's it going, guys? I have that pendant for... No, she runs right in there, and she's happy, and she's greeting everybody. And they kind of implied at that's the other thing that I totally forgot was mentioned was, you remember later on when Paul and Rudy are separating at Millis, he had Norn behind Paul saying, no, I don't want to say goodbye to Rudy. And then Ruijerd comes over and puts his hand on Norn's head and said, you should cherish your siblings or something like that. It was so funny because you realize now, again, looking back, what was the last time that we seen Norn like that? Or at least just before the man disaster, the statement that was made by Zenith was, because why was Sylphy bullied? She's like, well, they see her hair as the color of a superb. She's like, well, what's a superb? She's like, it's something that will eat you in your dreams or something like that. And I'm like, you scarred her. You scarred her. And then here we have Ruijerd again, consoling Norn about, cherishing your family. So it was funny. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about?
Oh, Sylphy growing. I can't wait to see her again. I wonder how much they're going to change her character artwork when they finally meet each other.
Yeah, you gotta avoid those spoilers in the ED. They kind of show her.
Did they?
At least their silhouette. It's not too visible, but that was the other thing, because they technically showed Paul in that ED as well with the bikini armor lady. I always, for some reason, I thought it was Gallus or something. I don't know. I'm bad like that. I'm sorry. But yeah, speaking of Sylphy, this is, of course, once Roxy leaves. Roxy does give Rudy her pendant from her village. Was obviously is a treasured thing from her village. She gives Rudy that pendant because she didn't really have anything else prepared. And obviously that's the thing that he later on gives to Ruijerd to make him disguise himself as one of, the Midgard people. And eventually he uses that to kind of sway Rudy from selling his stuff, because obviously it's a treasured item. But yeah, we meet Sylphy. It's a bullied kid with green hair, but no gym like the Superds had. So the assumption is that she's being bullied because she looks kind of like a Superd, but she's not. She's actually a half elf. Her father, I think she said her father is a half elf, and her mother obviously is a human because she doesn't look like she has pointy ears. But I think she said that her father was a half elf. So I don't know if they would be considered quarter elf or if it's considered half elf.
Quarter elves.
That's what I know. It's like I've seen so many stories where it's a half elf with a human, but they never say that the children are quarter elf or anything. It's like it always sways one way or the other. Either they become human, or they born as a human, or they're born as a half elf. So
I wonder if they're just using the word the word for half, like hafu, or something like that, and I think so. I think it's implying that they're technically half human, half elf, as in that they're not full human. Right.
It's not that it is a elf that bred with a human made a half elf. It's just they're not human. They're partially human. They're always partially human, I guess, is a way to put it.
Just a generalized statement of just half breed, effectively.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, he meets this Sylphy. She's being bullied, and it's so funny that I like that they actually called back to that bully later on as being the guy that they were saving from slavery in the later part when he first.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah. At some point, as leaving the bar after having this argument with his father, he's like, everybody from Bueno Village was transferred here, or was transferred throughout the world, and so we're trying to save them. And he recalls like, oh yeah, that's why I recognize that kid. He was the one that was bullying Sylphy. I'm like, I can't believe they brought that jerk back. They had to bring him back and make him look like this poor guy that's totally broken because, again, what they're doing with all the people that are transported, or at least some of them, anyways. But yeah, so he basically protects her, heals her and throws water on her and all that kind of stuff, and becomes friends with her. Obviously, at the time, he thinks it's a boy, so boku, 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 boku. He kind of pushes the idea that Sylphy's like this Shota, like this pretty elf that is going to lure all the girls in so that he can get a harem. Like, man, I got to stick with this guy because he's going to be real pretty later on, and all the girls are going to be swarming around him, and I'll be right there next to him. So obviously
to console him after he breaks their hearts.
Yeah. He'll be right there. He'd be a perfect wingman to get all the excess that he can't handle. But yeah, obviously, they kind of hang out for a little bit, have a lot of fun. The problem is that when he goes back home, obviously, this boy that he, gets to leave Sylphy alone ends up taking his mom over to Paul, and complaining that Rudy had punched her son. I got a kick out of the fact that later on they point out the idea that this keeps happening. Like the mother keeps showing up with this boy and claiming that Rudy beat him up. And he claims that it's probably the mother just wants to see Paul. So she's literally using her son to claim that Rudy is abusing him just so that she can come see Paul, because obviously Paul is this womanizer and handsome guy. But yeah.
That was actually a really great scene for Rudy as well. The
initial scene, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to stand my ground. I did the right thing. Do you want me to lie to you and say I didn't do the right thing or something like that?
Yeah, that's one of those. This is kind of an ongoing thing for Rudy's story, is that boundary of the mind of a 44-year-old versus the mind of a child. That he so often utilizes the age that he is, and he's not 30, he's 34, I'm sorry. The mind of a 34-year-old versus, I'm thinking of, again, Roxy. I keep going back and forth within two of them. But yeah, this is kind of this is probably one of the more uncomfortable scenes in the show, not as a bad thing. One of the more uncomfortable scenes, because you have Rudy come home after meeting Sylphy and fighting back these bullies, and Paul is waiting for him, and he's like, what have you done? This guy's mother came over. What did you do to him? All that kind of stuff. You beat him. You punched him, whatever. And yeah, it's that moment of any normal kid would go, I'm sorry, Dad. What did I do? I'm so sorry. What did I do? Because he is young. He's a very young kid at this point. But yet his 34-year-old mind immediately manipulates his father. And it's like, again, one of those uncomfortable things of like, this guy is not even able to be a father to him because he's technically older than him. It's like, how can you argue with a son who's technically older than you? And I wouldn't say that he's more mature than Paul. Well, you can argue that with how Paul messes around, but Lilia. Anyways, but no, it's that aspect of he knows how to manipulate people because he's been alive longer than him and has technically in his previous life manipulated people. He was a shut-in that was feeding off of other people. So it was uncomfortable in the idea that it wasn't an argument that Rudy should have won, but he's able to win it because he knows how to manipulate people. And that was why it was kind of harsh, because, yeah, he literally, the moment that Paul reprimands him, what does he do? Oh, well, I'm sorry, Dad. I should have known. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to go out, and if I see 3 people bullying a person, I'll be the 4th one. And we'll bully that person. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll make sure I correct that. And I start bullying that person instead of helping them. It was like this moment of like, oof. But at the same time, yes, the argument is Paul should have had him say what he did first to find out if he was telling the truth. Because not everybody that comes up there and says, your son punched my son, is telling the truth. And he should have of course, he does say that. Rudy does say that to Paul. Like, you should have asked me what my side of it was. You immediately assumed, I thought I gained your trust. I thought I was a good boy, and I've been doing everything to do what you want me to do. And the moment I step away from you, you assume I'm a terrible person. And yeah, I grant that. I grant that what has he done that has betrayed your trust enough that you won't listen to him? Like, you won't trust that he's going to do the right thing. Because, again, Paul's thing that he's instilled upon him is if you see somebody in danger, you help them. You always help somebody in danger. You always help the weakest of people. So it was again, a very uncomfortable scene, but it's a really good scene. One of my favorite scenes of the series. I think every scene that has Paul and Rudy going at it has always been a good one.
It's funny because I was planning on holding off on that. Because
we're going to get to that episode.
The difference in how much how I like Paul is vastly different from here to the scene later on. So
yeah, it constantly changes, which was one of the cool things about that whole aspect. But yeah, eventually Sylphy asks Rudy to train her in magic, so he starts training her. Eventually, he thinks that his whole incantationless spell casting is a cool thing. He's like, man, I'm so glad that I have this one thing that's unique about me in this reincarnation. And then suddenly Sylphy does it. He's like, never mind. I guess that's not unique to me being isekai to this world. Sylphy's doing it just willy-nilly. But yeah, eventually they end up going home because they get wet. And yeah, this is where Rudy finally discovers that Sylphy is Sylphiette and is a girl because he's dumb.
Half-breed elf git.
Oh, gosh. Then that was another one of those great moments with him and Paul, because this is kind of following him, that whole argument between the two of them. And now we have this point which Paul can definitively reprimand Rudy, and Rudy accepts it because he knows he screwed up really bad. Like, he embarrassed this girl and he should have known. And I like how his response is to go down there and say, sorry, I thought with your short hair you were a boy. And she starts crying again. Like, oh yeah, by the way, where's the wound at? Let me throw some salt at it. But then following this, you have this whole moment where Paul's, again, I think it's, interestingly enough, it doesn't seem like it should be, but this was a huge turning point for Paul and Rudy, because this was the first point in which Rudy seriously I screwed up. I seriously screwed up with this girl. And he starts consoling in Paul, who reprimands him. And now from that point on, it seems like he accepts things from his father more. Even though he still sees Paul as this womanizer, he's I also at the same time respect the man because of what he's able to pull off. Of course, he also respects Paul because Paul is a very skilled swordsman. I mean, he's advanced in all sword techniques, I believe is what they said. So he does actually technically, respect him for that. Yes, Paul's advanced in all three sword styles. Sword god style, water god style, and Norse god style. Have we seen a water god style ability?
No, I don't know.
Huh. I forgot that was one of them. But yeah, he kind of helps him out with trying to smooth things over with
if he's
Sylphy,
advanced, that implies that the ranking system that you were asking about earlier.
Right. He would be under Saint, which... So technically right now, and granted, weapon skills versus magic skills, the levels might be different. There's nothing currently that we know of that says that because you're a saint mage that you just wreck all advanced swords people.
Yeah, it's true.
There's nothing implying that, because technically Rudy does get his butt kicked on a regular basis by Paul, and Paul's advanced, and technically Rudy is one level up as saint water mage. And he's still getting his butt kicked by his father. So again, there's the answer right there. It doesn't necessarily mean because you're a higher rank mage, you're going to beat all swords, because sword and magic is different. Now, it does imply the idea that, or I would assume it implies the idea that if somebody uses a saint magic ability, he's probably going to wreck somebody that's using advanced magic, because it's going to be bigger and presumably more powerful. But yeah. Again, Paul is advanced in all three sword styles, which that would imply why Paul was able to kind of explain to Rudy how the abilities, or how each sword skill works, or maybe he used his throwing sword ability on Rudy at some point. That's how Rudy knows that one guy throwing the weapon is a part of a particular sword style. So, yeah. Is it, I think it was North God. I think North God was a thrower. We'll get into it eventually. But yeah, that's when he gets the letter from Roxy saying that she's acquired king rank, and assumes that he is emperor, but he's not. He's still saint, as far as we know. Find out about the Renoa Academy again. She's still implying to him that he should go to the academy. And this is the point in which Rudy decides to ask Paul, hey, look, Sylphy's already expressed that he doesn't want him to leave. I think at some point he mentions to Sylphy that he wants to get better. He's kind of at a block, and he thinks that he's going to go to this academy. And that's when Sylphy obviously is a little upset, like, no, don't leave me. Again, she's become kind of reliant on him. So Rudy decides to ask Paul, hey, can you pay for both of us to go to this academy so they don't have to leave Sylphy behind? And yeah, Paul's like, no, ain't happening. Kind of mentioned the idea that it's because, one, he's of his age, he's too young. Two, he says that he's not going to allow him as his sensei in swords to leave because he's not skilled enough. Like, I want you to be this good at swords before I let you leave me, my presence, basically. And again, of course, the biggest one is obviously money. This was a funny scene because this is right after we obviously found out about, I think it was right after we found out about the infidelity of him and him getting, Lilia pregnant. So there's like this whole scene of them like having this conversation. Every time he speaks up, it's like, no, I'm not going to do this. They both kick him in the knees. So they know that Zenith and Lilia have a strong hold of him. But yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, we found out that through Zenith claiming that she's pregnant, like Lilia's like, oh yeah, by the way, me too. We're both pregnant. And I did like this whole scene because it had Rudy obviously at this point acknowledging how much Lilia means to him, which I don't think we really had that perspective before, because it's always kind of like Lilia just kind of shows up after he does something. So the moment that he destroys the wall in the house, Lilia's over there cleaning something. It's like she's just taking care of things. So it's this moment where you kind of have him actually acknowledge the fact that Lilia means a lot to him because she's this maid that has, whenever he's sick, she takes care of him. Whenever he's cold at night, she brings him a blanket without him asking for it. All these things that she takes care of without him really asking for it. And so him kind of acknowledging how much she means to him, he goes out of his way to basically throw his dad under the bus to save her. He's like, I guess I'll handle it. So he goes up, and obviously Zenith and Lilia are sitting there, and Paul's in the other room, kind of sad because obviously he screwed up. Rudy comes in and is like, does this mean I'm going to have two siblings? And she's like, it's fine. We can't do this right now. And he's like, is Lilia going to have to leave? No, we're still talking about that. What was it? How does he say it? It was something like, why is Lilia in trouble when Paul's the one that had power over him? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, I heard him say at some point she can't refuse him because she's under him or something like that, or like he's her master or something like that. And that just blows everything up. Paul comes running in like, what? I didn't say that. You're like, oh, Lilia, did he really force you? No, nothing like that ever happened. It's okay, Lilia. I know that you don't have to, if he's trying to force you to say this, it's okay. It totally blows it. Of course, Paul like takes this out on Rudy later on because he literally lied, but it was a funny scene because, like I said, it both established the fact that Rudy appreciates Lilia and trying to help her. It also includes this, obviously this funny aspect of him manipulating the situation and trying to help Lilia by manipulating his parents, which it was a good answer in the end. It was this idea that, especially for Aisha, it's not really Aisha's fault that this situation happened. If Lilia leaves, at least Aisha's dead. She won't survive. They said a month travel to her homeland.
Yeah.
If Lilia survives, which she could possibly, Aisha's not. Aisha, this newborn child, is not going to survive that travel. They need to stay there. And that's, of course, Zenith does accept them as a family. You're staying here. You're family now. We'll deal with this. We'll kick Paul in the shins every 2 seconds because he's an idiot. That kind of aspect. But this also does open up Lilia's dialogue. We finally get to see how Lilia feels about Rudy, because we see where she's talking about how, yes, at the beginning, Rudy always looked at her with this pervy face. She thought that he was possessed or something like that. Always imply this idea that something was wrong with Rudy. But at the same time, she mentions the idea that she knows he saved her. Like, she knows that he did something, that he lied to protect her, and thus protected her daughter. And what does she say after this? And this, again, is one of those things that I've completely forgotten about. The moment if this baby survives, if this baby grows old, she will serve Rudy.
Right.
I will have her serve Rudy. I'm like, I completely forgot about that. Again, yes, kind of like, what does the girl want when she grows up? That's their status. She is a maid. Her daughter will probably be a maid, and that's how they survive, because obviously she doesn't have a family to go to, at least that we know of. Again, light novel people don't say anything. Aisha will then serve Rudy, and I think that was kind of an interesting thing that I, again, completely forgotten about. But yeah, this is when we find out that because of what Rudy requested, he needs money. He asked Paul to find him a job, obviously, so that he could pay for both of them. And apparently Paul finds a job, and like they give him no warning. Like, he's just training Rudy one morning, and suddenly Ghislaine shows up, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my gosh, beast people! There's beast people in this world." I like how short Ghislaine was. Like, whatever she says, anything's like, "Oh, so you made it here?" Yeah, it's just very short. But yeah, this is when Rudy finds out. Hey, by the way, you're going to train. Well, no, he doesn't find out. He's like, literally, Paul attacks him and starts fighting him, and they fight it out for a while, and then he knocks him out, and then he wakes up, and he's in this carriage with Ghislaine, and there's a letter, and he starts reading the letter, and the letter basically explains to him, hey, you're becoming too reliant on Sylphy. You wanted a job. You're going to go to this other place. You're going to train this girl of this family, and you're also going to train Ghislaine, who's in front of you, and says a bunch of stupid things about how she's dumb, so she won't understand things, and he has to read it out loud. But yes, he's okay with Ghislaine training him, because obviously Ghislaine is a sword king, and so he says that he's never beat, and it makes sense, because if Paul is advanced rank in all swords, he can't beat a sword king.
All right.
So he says that he's never beat Ghislaine. She's a sword king, and he's only beat her once, and that was in bed. And he said,
I was gonna say, I thought there was a caveat.
There was one win. the ring. Oh my gosh. So they did mention this idea that, yeah, technically, he also mentioned the idea that you can have your way with the girl, but don't touch Ghislaine, because Ghislaine's mine. And Ghislaine immediately goes, take that letter and send it to Zenith. He's like, oh, we do. But yeah, he's supposed to go there, train her. Also, he will train Ghislaine in arithmetic and language and magic. And in return, Ghislaine will train him in sword skill. And again, he's going to train this other girl and all those things. So he's set off. He's going to be there for the next 5 years until he reaches the age of 12. So he's 7 at this point, teaching writing, reading, arithmetic, and magic. So yep, that's when he's sent off and goes to the Gray Rat family's home, the Boreas Gray Rat family home, which we eventually find out that, yes, there's 4 families.
4 families.
One being obviously Paul's family, which is the Notos, the Boreas family, which is the ones that he's with right now. They don't mention the other ones, other than the fact that there is obviously an inner conflict between the Gray Rat families over power, and so they have to keep this fact that Rudy's there a secret, because the other Boreas family, that the brother that essentially won the status of the lead of the family, them knowing that Philip Boreas has somebody of the Notice family in his home could make them believe that there's like conspiring happen to essentially take them out. So they wanted to keep that a secret. So that was that whole stuff later on was really kind of, ooh, okay, this is interesting. They're kind of waiting a lot on not Paul, but Rudy at that point. But yeah, they get there. They find this. This is one of the more enjoyable things about rewatching this entire thing, was really getting this perspective of a post perspective of how things kind of panned out. The moment that he obviously gets to the there, and they bring him in, and they say, okay, you're going to train my daughter. Her name's Eris. And I hope that you can pull it off, because everybody else gave up. And so they finally go in there to meet Eris. And I'm like, man, I took a screenshot of it and I tweeted it. I'm like, this face she's giving Rudy right now is the face that she now gives to everybody that offends Rudy. It's kind of interesting to kind of look from a later perspective of like, wow, she doesn't give him that face no more. She only gives it to everybody else. But yeah,
it is nice to have a consistency there of, yes, she is a tsundere through and through, and just because one person got the dere doesn't mean that everybody else did.
Yeah. So yeah, in order to kind of gain her trust, he kind of talks to Philip about...
Unless you're a puppy girl.
What?
Unless you're a beastkin.
Yeah, she was kind of nice to...
You can break through that wall very fast that way.
Well, no, there was a cat girl. Cat girl that he... Tona. You're talking about Tona?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The girls in the beast tribe.
Teresina was a puppy girl too, so, but yeah. Yeah. But yeah, he basically talks to his Eris's dad because the first encounter is going there and going, hey, how's it going? He does a little bow and everything, and I think she's like, basically, no, I don't want to learn anything, and then she smacks him because she talked back to him. And then he smacks her back, and then she just flips out and starts wrecking the crap out of him. He uses wind magic to blow her off and then runs away, and you have this whole kind of Godzilla thing where she's marching by as he's hiding under the table. It's like, this lady's crazy. But yeah, he basically won't give up because he feels like if he goes back home, Paul's going to make fun of him, so he decides to work with Philip to enact a plan to have them kidnapped, stage a fake kidnapping of the both of them, so that she has to rely on him to use magic, or at least learn magic, to get them out of the situation. And yes, as we find out, the guy, the butler or whatever, the butler that they're using obviously wants to get rid of Eris, so they basically kidnap them for real and beat the living crap out of poor Eris. And he thinks the entire time that these people are acting like really getting into their acting. But yeah, they were actually kidnapped. And this kind of forces Eris to kind of accept his help because obviously she's always relied on other people to do what she wants them to do, and now she has to fight her urge to just tell Rudy to do something. Now she has to ask. I did get a kick out of the fact that at some point he's telling her that she can't yell at him anymore or scream or anything like that or be violent to him. And at some point you realize even though she wants to call out for something, she keeps covering her mouth. Like she's trying to keep to her word that she won't do this kind of stuff. But they escape it. They run away. At some point they end up getting cornered, or at least she gets kidnapped again. And they were mentioning the idea of hey boy, you work with us and you can make some money. And he's like, well, how much? And he's like, well, this much. He's like, will that help me get to go to a magic academy or something like that? They said, yeah, like tenfold, I think, like that. So it's like establishing a large amount of money. But he's like, you can never put a price on Dede. Mm-hmm. Fights back against them. Yeah, that's when the guy takes the sword and throws it, which is, that's again where they mention the fact that he's a North god style and that he's actually using a throwing skill rather than him just throwing out desperation. So, yeah, and that's when he does cast a spell previous to this, which is kind of like a firework, and then that's when Ghislaine runs in and shields them from, or just decimates the sword that the guy's throwing, and then just shreds everybody else. That's, I think, when we get the first idea of, oh wow, this is a sword king right here. Like she just completely, instantaneously knocked them all out, just like that, which was really cool. Ghislaine is amazing. So yeah, they eventually go back home and to kind of find out that this butler was a bad guy. Rudy thinks that he's done and over with. He's going to walk back home, and that's when Eris is like, where are you going? Come back here. You're going to train me, all that kind of stuff. And they get into the little training process. I think the only thing that really kind of note during the whole training session, where he's training them magic, arithmetic, and all that kind of stuff, writing, reading. At the same time, he's learning sword skill. Eris is just kind of learning everything and doesn't like learning anything but magic. And swords, I guess. Swords too. But I think the only thing interesting here, at some point they do have Eris having to learn dancing for her 10th birthday. And so he does get a little free time where he starts getting into languages. And that's when we learn that there is man god language, there's beast god, then there's demon god, beast god, and man god. I think are the three that he learns, which obviously man god is similar to human speak, whereas the other two he has to help, or has Ghislaine help him with the beast god, because obviously she is the beast tribe, so, or beast person. Yeah, no, it was beast god, battle god, and demon god. And that beast god was similar to human, so battle god language. I don't know. Anyways, yeah. I think at some point they do technically hit on the idea that he relies on Ghislaine to kind of push Eris to have to learn, because obviously, why is Ghislaine wanting to learn? There's obviously a reason why she wants to learn. So that gets into talking about the party of six, which again is Paul and Paul, Zenith, and as we kind of find out later on, Ellie, I hate saying this name, Ellie, the elf, Talhan, which I'm assuming is the cleric. I don't think they've specifically said, but again, when they show the silhouettes, and when Talhan's silhouette showed up, they said cleric. Geese the thief, and Ghislaine is the... Was it swords? There were two swordsmen, which would be Ghislaine and Paul, and I think they said fighter when they showed Ellie the elf. So I'm guessing she's some sort of fighter. Again, I don't think we've really gotten into what fighters are, but again, we know what the swords people are based on Paul and Ghislaine.
Was the dwarf in there?
Yeah, he was the cleric.
He was the cleric. I know that he's the cleric.
Yeah, and then Zenith was the mage. Which was weird too, because I had assumed that Zenith was going to be a mage or a cleric because she had healing abilities, but we already found out that mages can use healing abilities through Roxy and stuff, so that's not really the defining factor. So yeah, when she's trying to bolster Eris's desire to study, she says, "Oh well," he kind of nudged her and said, "Hey, say something to get her interested in learning." She's like, "Okay, well, yeah, the Fang of the Black Wolf, which was their party of 6." Had 2 fighters again. That would be Paul and Ghislaine. Or they say fighters. 2 swordsmen. 1 fighter, which again would be Ellie. Then you have the thief, Geese. The mage, Zenith. The cleric, which would be Talhand. 7 years ago, they talk about 7 years ago when they first had the point in which Paul and Zenith retired. She said that she couldn't handle money at all, so she really quickly ran out of money and was forced to have to eat dung just to keep alive, and that made her extremely sick. And so Eris should learn how to read and write because she obviously was terrible with money, and that immediately encourages Eris to continue training because obviously don't want that to happen. But yeah, we find out about the aphrodisiac. She buys him an aphrodisiac at some point. They do get a perspective of money, which I, again, completely forgotten about. They kind of equated gold to be an equivalent of what we would kind of equate it to, probably about a little bit over $900. So it does not, the fact that because Zenith had like 7 books, that's like a lot of money, like $7,000, something like that. So it implies that she at some point came across a lot of money, or at least what they were doing. I think they were S-rank adventurers, if I remember correctly. So technically, they probably were making some decent money.
That was a great scene though, with the aphrodisiac. It was like, you obviously really want this, so I bought it for you. And it's like, yeah, obviously you don't know what that is.
She's like, I said it was like an aphrodisiac or something. What's that? Yeah, you're gonna explain it. Around the same time, we did learn about Pergus, which they mentioned the fact where he knows this flying fortress, which he's like, what the heck is that? He's like, that is the fortress of Pergus, the armored dragon king. Pergus is one of the 3 heroes who beat the demon god Laplace. They mentioned that the Laplace was this evil person that was trying to wipe out humans. Pergus and his 12 servants. It's kind of interesting they noted his servants. Like he has, Pergus was, I guess, this person that just had servants that were working for him. They went in there and they defeated Laplace. And this is the current age of 414, so it technically implies that it's been about 414 years of the armored dragon calendar to kind of name the calendar after the deeds that he did. So, yeah. And again, later on, as we get into Ruijerd's story, that we kind of find out the other side of that whole story, which was what Laplace was doing. So, yeah, I forgot about the whole thing of her asking Rudy if he would train her in magic, and they use the neon thing because obviously they really like beast people.
Twin tails.
Yes, it was to the twin tails was to signify the drooping ears. That's why she did it. They're kind of graduate. He ends up giving them their gifts as kind of because obviously when Roxy had trained him, she gave him a wand. It's, I guess, what all mages do when they train somebody as their disciple. Eventually, when they graduate, they will give them a wand in kind of celebration of that. He ends up doing that, and also since it's kind of her birthday, or Eris's birthday, she ends up getting a gift from Ghislaine, which was the ring, which is the one that's supposed to ward off wolves. Which apparently she knows is superstitious because one night Paul, they were out in the lake, and he like cuts off like, I don't want to know any more about what you're gonna say. But yeah, at some point he ends up kind of noting that there was somebody in one of the towers. He ends up going over there and finding Lord Soros, which is Eris's grandfather, is up in the tower with one of the beast people. And they kind of note this thing up in the sky, which is this weird orb thingy-majiggy that's seemingly building power, which we assume later on. But yeah, he kind of says that it... And this is, again, another one of those things where, from the perspective of now, looking back, is kind of interesting. That since this orb that we assume was the building of the mana that did this mana disaster, I'm assuming that was part of the mana disaster, because that's the thing that they look at, the point in which the mana disaster happens. So I'm assuming that thing was the initial. This is the thing that caused it. And they're noting that this thing's up in the sky, and Rudy's trying to like, what is this thing? And Soros is like, I don't know what it is, but it shouldn't be a bad thing. And it was a really weird statement, because it's this idea that he can't do anything about it, so he's going to assume it's a good thing, so he doesn't worry about it. It was a very weird statement. But at the same time, looking at that from a retrospect, after us seeing later on they essentially execute Soros because he failed to protect his people, does technically imply, yes, you technically didn't do anything about it. You could have done something about it. Like, the moment you seen it, why not make it a thing? He was the lord of this land. It was his duty to find out what that was and possibly protect people.
Yeah.
So it sucks because Soros ends up getting executed because of it. But at the same time, he knew about it at this point. Like, they seen it at this point, and he could have done something. He could have evacuated people. He could have moved people. He could have done something, but instead, he chose to look at it as, it's not a bad thing. We're not going to worry about it. So, and it kind of sucks the fact that he's now executed, because we don't really get a perspective of, why didn't you really do anything? Like, why wasn't there something done? But yeah. Anywho, 2 years pass after this. Eris becomes 12 years old. She is now an advanced rank sword god style. The thing in the sky keeps getting bigger, and we have essentially everybody secretly failing miserably at this. Secretly throw throw Rudy his 10th birthday, because again, the 5-year points are when they actually celebrate it. He's turning 10, so they wanted to throw him a party. And they obviously know that he's so far away from home. They know that they can't broadcast that it's his birthday. They have to keep it a secret, that they feel a necessity to do a really good one. Eris is like super excited about doing it, even though she's failing miserably at doing it secretly. But yeah, we end up finding out later on that Paul and Zenith couldn't even show up because, again, the mana disaster that's building up is causing more animals to show up, and they have to protect the village. So yeah, the worst kept secret happening. And eventually, what was it? Yeah, it was they were having Ghislaine keep him busy and distracted while they were setting things up. And he knows what they're doing, so he's like, "Oh, this must be the day. Well, I'm gonna go do something." And she's like, "No, you can't do anything right now." He's like, "Oh, really? Oh, well." She's like, I forget exactly how it comes up, but he brings up this figure that he's making of Ghislaine. She's like, "There's no tail on it." He's like, "Yeah, I don't really know how it connects. Could you show me?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." Pulls down her pants, and of course somebody has to walk in on it. But yeah, it was kind of a funny little situation, kind of building up to him having his birthday, which was really cool. But no, I really liked the birthday because it was like this whole thing of like how much everybody, I guess, loves Rudy at this point. Because I completely skipped the whole. I keep scrolling through the stuff and missing like really cool parts. But yeah, they were obviously all love Rudy for the whole experience that happened with Eris's 10th birthday, and so like everybody treats him like his own son. So like the moment that he's like, he knows he has to turn on the waterworks when they kind of reveal it, because obviously he already knew. And so when they all reveal it, he starts kind of like throwing in the water, like, "Oh man, I'm so happy. I kind of miss my family and all that kind of stuff." And it's like, "Well, we have a surprise for you." "Oh, is it because my family's? You have my family here?" And like, "No, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, they couldn't show up." And
he broke the ultimate tsundere in the house.
Yeah, it was like he's like, well, no, it's not even just that. It was just like Soros is like, "To war against the Notos. We're gonna put Rudy as the head of the family." And then you have, the mom kind of runs up and consoles him and says, "You need to marry my daughter." And she says, "I'm going to adopt you." "No, you can marry Eris." It was really funny. They had to drag her away. But yeah, they end up giving him the staff, which they call the Aqua Hartia, which is the staff that he always carries around now. Took them a lot to put together. No, but I forgot to mention, Eris on her 10th birthday, that was a fantastic episode as well, because it had that point which obviously Rudy kind of helps her with her training and dancing, and eventually gets to the point where she does go out there for her 10th birthday, which is important for them as nobles, to her to be a good dancer, to show that she was successful. But then she fails at dancing, so everybody sees her as a failure of a daughter and all that kind of stuff, which again hits heavy on when you realize what's going on with the Boreas family. How important it was that she showed that she was competent, and he kind of steps out there and uses her, kind of has her focus like she's dodging in combat and stuff like that to help her imagine what she needs to do. And then they end up having this fantastic dance, and everybody's really super happy, and everybody sees how great Rudy is because he basically saved Eris in that situation, which again was a huge turning point for her and her love for Rudy. Like, I think that was, like, one of the biggest turning points, because that was a point which literally all the Soon is gone at that point. Like, the Soon has been broken at that. It's still there, but all the Tsundere was broken the moment that he saved her in front of her entire family, didn't make her family look like idiots, which was great as well. So, and plus, everybody wanted to bed him at that point. But then it came up the conversation of Philip essentially... It's one of those where you don't really know if he's serious or not, but literally Philip is saying, if you want, say the word, I will give you Eris, and I will work behind the scenes and make you the head of Boreas. Like, he's like, no, I don't want to get involved with all this stuff. But literally Philip is giving Rudy the option. You can take over the family, and I'll help you behind the scenes to fight and basically become the head of the family. Like, not just the head of his family, but the head of Boreas, like, completely. Like, this is where that inner family struggle happening is building up, because what was the thing he was bringing up at the time? The reason why Hilda kept looking at her so scornfully was because his older brother, who took over the family, every time she bore a son, they would take the family away, or they would take the child away, because they didn't want Philip and Hilda to raise a son that could possibly take over the family. So any boys born in this family is immediately taken away. And so Hilda didn't like this Rudy walking around, this gray rat walking around this house, when she couldn't even have her own sons there. So again, it was hitting heavy. Like, they're going through, it sucks what they're going through. And so if he can possibly use Rudy to do that, he will. He will use Rudy to do that. So
I thought the gray rats were taking the males from the Boreas family.
That's what I just said. Every time Hilda had a son, they would take him away.
You were saying make Rudy take over the Boreas family. You meant that he was trying to take over the Grey Rat family.
Well, yeah, in a sense it would be, because the Boreas is the strongest family. The Boreas family runs everything. The oldest brother of the Boreas family is currently heading everything. And every time Hilda had a son, his older brother of the Boreas family would take those sons because they don't want anybody to succeed him.
So who's controlling the Grey Rat family?
The Boreas family. Okay. Philip's older brother of the Boreas Grey Rat family is running everything. So, yeah. Anyhow, but yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing.
Branch families are confusing.
Yeah, this was the explanation. Eris had two brothers, one older and one younger. They were took by his brother to the capital after birth. Because he lost the succession in a dispute, or he lost the succession dispute, obviously, because his brother won. All men of Boreas blood. So it's not specifying outside, like Notos again with Paul's family. All of Boreas blood is raised at the head's family household. Hilda refused to accept it, obviously, and she hated that her own children couldn't be there, so that's why she was angry at him. Yeah, that's when we get a scene where Eris was in the bedroom waiting for Paul when he retired for the day. So yeah. This is where we do get that scene where Paul is fighting the beasts because of the increased amount of mana. Ends up going back to his house. This was a funny part, because the thing that they imply, because obviously when Rudy first went to Eris for the whole job. He was knocked out. He didn't get a chance to prepare his stuff, take everything he needed. So the sad thing that he was sad about, is that he left his sacred treasure behind. And when that scene where Sylphy comes in and she has a pendant to give to Rudy for his 10th birthday, the other thing that it implied was that Lilia had this little box, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be sending this to Rudy," and she's like, "Well, what is that?" "Oh, it's Rudy's sacred treasure." So it's implying that Lilia was going to send Rudy Roxy's pantsu. That's so great. So I wonder if that implies that Lilia has it with her wherever she's at right now. Technically, I think she was holding Aisha, so that's why Paul ended up with Norm, is because he was holding Norn. Aisha's implied to be with Lilia because she had Lilia with her, or Aisha with her.
You know that Aisha's going to show up in front of Rudy and say, "Master, I have your sacred treasure." You know this is going to happen.
Gochi-sama. That would be great. But yeah, that's where
Mom told me never to open it.
Yeah. But yeah, the mana starts gathering up. That's when we get a couple shots of different people. One being this guy that has scales under his eyes. He's currently being attacked by a dragon, and the dragon basically is not able to touch him and then leaves him alone. I was kind of thinking, because later on when we talk about the whole different types of the 7...
Yeah, I thought about that too.
I'm thinking he's probably the god, the dragon god one.
God. Yeah.
I'm assuming, obviously, that the Kirishiri girl is the demon empress, is going to be the god one, or the demon one. What was it at? Yeah, part. Yeah, here it is right here. It is the 7 strongest fighters in the world. Current order, starting from 1, was Technique, Dragon, Battle, Demon, Death, Sword, and North God. So again, I'm assuming that probably the demon god's probably going to be Kishiri, I can't say her name. Kishirika. I'm assuming that the dragon god's going to be that guy, because obviously he has scales on his face. The dragon tries to attack him, it doesn't touch him, and then it leaves him. So that's my assumption. I don't think I have anything implying death or battle or anything like that. So anyways, it shows them, him, and he's like, what is this gathering for? Notes again, Kishirika, and she's like, "Come with me, my servants," and she's literally walking with nobody behind her. I don't know if do you think that's like a delusion of grandeur thing, that she thinks that some people are following her, or do you think it's her talking to her eyes? It's probably her delusion of grandeur.
It's an interesting thought, though, that's for sure.
But yeah, this time they're currently out there going to do, I think they were doing their graduation test on both Eris and Ghislaine. Was it they were doing their graduation, or were they testing his? Was he showing off a skill? But anyways, there's this big gathering of mana.
It probably was a test, because that's how Roxy did it with him. Was she showed off hers and then had him do his? Right.
That was my assumption. But they were going out there because they didn't want to damage anything. But yeah, that's when we see that Periguis ends up ordering Almanfi, which I'm guessing is one of the 12 servants, Almanfi the Radiant, to go down and investigate and kill anyone suspicious about that gathering of mana. He believes that it's possibly going to be breaking the seal on Laplace. That's when Almanfi ends up confronting Ghislaine, and that's, again, he's claiming that Rudy is causing it. And she says, again, swearing by her teacher, the sword god Gal Farion, and the honor of Daldia, that he's not involved. And that's when the mana disaster happens. They get teleported away. And yeah, we have the first meeting with the man god. I really hate the CGI man god. I really don't like the CGI man god. But yeah, that's when, we have the man god confront Rudy, starts talking about trying to give him advice. And he claims that he's a trickster from the old world, trying to trick him into something. But eventually tells him, you're going to be confronted by somebody when you wake up. Stick by them and actually help him. And we're assuming he's talking about Ruijerd at that point. So he wakes up and he meets Ruijerd. We meet the superb Ruijerd Superdia. And that guy apparently seen them falling from the sky, both him and Eris, and has been kind of helping him out. And so, yeah, that's when Rudy kind of allows, okay, we're gonna use you to, we're gonna have you, he's gonna accept his help because this superb apparently wants to help the name of the superbs by doing good things, and he's really seems to be extremely protective of children specifically. So he's willing to pretty much kill anybody to protect a child. And yeah, that's when we get a relapse of the the whole fable that all children are taught that the superb will come and eat you in your sleep, and so obviously terrifies Eris. I like it cuts from that scene to her basically like, Mom lied to me. What else did she lie to me about? Yeah, that's when we learn that the superbs have this eye on their forehead, which is obviously the symbol of it being a superb is green hair and the gem-like thing on their forehead. It's the eye that is able to basically see things unseen. So they mention the idea that how do you know that was there when you can't even see it? And he says he uses his eye. So he's able to see things that normally your normal vision can't see. That's when they go and visit Roxy's village. We finally meet the people of, was it Migard? The Migard tribe. And they end up talking with the Ruckus chief. Again, at this point, we learn that they do telepathy. They go to meet the chief. That's when we find out that Roxy apparently had left there 20 years prior, that they normally live about 200 years, and that, yes, Roxy is probably about 44 years old at this point. So, legal lollies that they call them.
Legal lollies.
The legal lollies. It's perfectly okay, vampire. But this is when we get the perspective of what happened with the superbs and what's going on with them, because, again, Ruijerd's helping them, and the chief is kind of digging up old wounds with Ruijerd and mentioning his desire to help people. So he's already been 10 years since he saved that girl, which he points out this Migard that's in the room. Yeah, Ruijerd aims to dispel the superbs tribe's poor rep. It's a deeply rooted basic fear of the superbs. It was all due to Laplace's scheme that he betrayed them during the war. He claims during the war with Laplace had gave them spears. The spears are their souls. Some of them refused to abandon their spears and use the new ones, but those that used the new ones obviously were the ones that were corrupted. During the war 400 years ago, the hero Laplace unified the demon race, won them rights from the humans. So again, this is that perspective of, is technically Laplace a bad person? Does it depend on your perspective that Laplace was a bad person? From the humans' ideal, we obviously see the hero Pelagus came in and stopped the evil Laplace that was killing the humans. But again, from the demon continent perspective, this is a guy that was gaining them rights, was pushing back against the humans to gain the demons' rights. So again, it depends on your perspective, which I think personally is cool. But yeah, he won the rights from the humans. The superb trites fought for him. In the end, Ruijerd and his men accepted the spears awarded to them. They were strong, they were unbeatable, but they began to change. They began to attack anyone, friend and foe. No one noticed the change, but soon they were killing everybody: parents, wives, siblings, children's. His spear is his soul, and the spear that Ruijerd is currently wielding is the soul of his son. He gave his life to save him from the curse. The infamy of the superbs is their punishment for trusting Laplace and accepting the cursed spears, and he must clear their name. He's been dealing with this alone and with regret for the last 400 years. So it's kind of implying at this point, man, I was kind of whining about my 20 years being a NEET and being bullied. This dude's been living with this for 400 years. Again, another one of those kind of nice parallels that he draws with him and his situation with his past life. But yeah, he claims at that point that he's going to help him any way that he can. And yeah, I think that was the point in which we finally get the realization from at least Rudy's perspective that he really does want to help clear the name of the superbs. That's when we head to the city of Rikarisu. At that point, they end up finding out that, yes, everybody's looking out for this dead end. They're like, who the heck is dead end? Oh, yeah, it's Ruijerd. Anybody that meets with Ruijerd is met with death, apparently. So they decide to disguise Ruijerd at this point as a Migard. So they decide he uses this kind of powder on these rocks to dye his hair blue. And then he gives him the necklace that Roxy gave him, which is from the Migards, to kind of wear as well. So they disguise him. But he decides to, I guess, enact this plan, this master plan that he has, which is where they go to the Adventurers Guild, they sign up to be adventurers, and they go under the name of Dead End, and he claims himself to be Ruijerd, and here's the Superb himself, and everybody's laughing because the dude literally has blue hair. He doesn't have green hair like Superbs are supposed to have. So I guess the idea here is to really kind of come out there swinging with this comedic look, like, it's a stupid group that thinks they're the Dead End. But in actuality, them doing acts under the name of Dead End will then improve the image of him. So, yeah. And this, of course, is when we first meet Nokopara, which he shows up there and makes fun of them as well. I like how this little frog guy is trying to trip Ruijerd, and Ruijerd just kind of looks down at him. And he keeps looking at him. The guy eventually goes, "This guy's going to kill me," and stops. This one we get our second visit by the man god. The man god basically points out that he should accept this job to find a kitten, which he obviously does, and ends up using Ruijerd's eyes to find the cat, which ends up being in this cave where this group of adventurers are essentially stealing animals just so that a job comes posted to find the animals, and then they return the animals claiming that they found the animal. And this obviously sets off Ruijerd. This is, again, I guess one of the first points in which we have, I guess, the brutality of the world kind of show up to Rudy. The first, obviously, was when Ghislaine slaughtered that group of kidnappers. But yeah, one of the kidnappers, or one of the animal kidnappers, kicks Rudy, and then immediately Ruijerd just cuts his head off, like without even hesitating. And obviously, he's like, "Well, why did you kill this guy?" He's like, "Well, he's evil, and I will destroy anything evil." And he's like, "That's not going to help your name by just killing everybody." But he was an evil person, and his argument was, it's not about who is killed, it is about who's doing the killing. And you're never going to be accepted and people not fear your name if they know that you just kill a bunch of people. They don't care that you killed evil people, they just fear you because you can kill people. Which I guess is technically a good point.
What an interesting thought I just kind of had on that. The man god only really gets involved with Rudy to kind of set things in motions that will affect Rudy in some way, shape, or form. I'm wondering if, because the first time he did it was obviously to get him to be with Ruijerd. This time I was like, I wonder what kind of was the point of having him go to this particular quest. And then I realized, if you think about it, not necessarily that particular point, but what it does is it causes Nokopara to change his ways, and then that in turn affects how he interacts with Roxy later on, and tells Roxy, you need to go back home, which will eventually makes her find out that Rudy is actually Dead End, and so eventually that will...
I can see that, but I think that's too much planning. The reason why I really do question it, though, is because technically with each situation, Rudy points out to the man god that he didn't actually help him. Like, the man god helps him, but he never admits that he helped him. So, I mean, for the statements that he made is technically, the first one was obviously go with Ruijerd, or stick with Ruijerd and help him. Now, he specifically says go with him and help him. And Rudy's kickback to him later is, well, he was going to help us anyways from the shadow. Even if we declined Ruijerd to stay with him, he would end up watching us from the shadows. He's like, so whatever you just said, it meant nothing because he would have done it anyways. But what was the difference there? He didn't say just stick with him. He said help him too. So to your point, the man god is trying to push something there because he is helping Ruijerd help the name of the Superbs, and that essentially does trigger a whole bunch of events, obviously, because all these things that he does to try to help him eventually leads to something. Now, the second one was to accept the job for the kittens. And what does he say later? That caused me a whole bunch of problems because you told me to do that. Like they ended up with the guy dead. It ended up with this Knuckle Potter guy trying to blackmail us. Ended up leading us to have to leave the village and hope that our adventurer's license doesn't get revoked. But he says, well, I didn't expect you to force them to work under you. I expected you to join them. Now, we don't know if the man god is telling the truth right there. He could just be lying to cover up that issue happened. I guess to cover up the fact that because this led to the misfortune, it's because, well, you didn't really do it the way that I wanted you to do it. I don't know if he's covering it up or not.
And that's why I said affect his life. I didn't actually say he would help him, or it would help him. It just affects his life. It vastly affects his life in a lot of different ways.
My point is that with every single one of them, he points out the fact that it doesn't necessarily go the way that he's claiming. Like the man god claims that he wants him to do it for this reason, but it never ends up that way. So it implies that whatever the man god's having him do, it never turns out the way the man god is claiming that it should go.
Has he made claims?
Yes, he said that I was telling you to go get the kitten because you're supposed to work with them, not force them to work
but that was later on. That's like when he said go.
I'm just saying it's not going in some patterned way the man god wants it to go.
Right, but he doesn't like with Ruijerd. He doesn't say go live with Ruijerd and help him, and that will make your life all rainbows and kittens.
No, he specifically said you're going to die otherwise.
You're going to die otherwise. That was the only die? That was the only other. That was the only real. That's my point. Is he doesn't really say you got to do this and you get this. He says go do this. And Rudy decides whether or not he's going to do it. Obviously, he ends up going in those directions, but not necessarily for any real gain outside of not dying.
Yeah, I was just correcting you because you were claiming that it was causing this domino effect of Roxy eventually going to town whenever.
Well, that's my point. I don't think
he foresees that, at least for now.
I think that's an interesting idea that I believe that it's the writers actually thinking that far ahead. And I think that's a really cool thing.
That's, again, rewatching through the whole thing, it really does. Again, Noko Para, I never expected him to be anything important. Mm-hmm. Technically, Gallus, I didn't expect to be anything important. Geese, didn't expect to be. Literally, I downplayed this. I in my notes for Geese, I never wrote down Geese because I just wrote him as the thief guy. Because I figured it was just a random thief guy. That he wasn't important in any way. But he was important. Noko Para, again, when he first showed Nakapara, I hated Nakapara. I'm like, this dude is a jerk. He's just manipulating everybody. Nakapara is very important. And that's what I've been noting in my recent videos. I keep pointing out the fact that he keeps surprising me that every single character in this series is important. No matter how minuscule they seem like it initially, everybody is important. So that's really good. Yeah, I forgot to mention that technically in the first meeting with the man god, it does mention that He asked the man god, so are you the reason I'm here?
Right.
And he says, no, it's the dragon god is able to do that kind of stuff. It doesn't say that the dragon god did it, but it implies that the dragon god has the ability to isekai people from other worlds. He says something to the effect that I think the only thing that he can do is move people throughout the six-sided world. I think it was something like that. Which I thought was kind of an interesting, random. I don't know. It doesn't really technically explain what a six-sided world is.
How many gods are there? How many technique gods are there? You said there was technique, dragon.
Well, let me read this part first, and then I can search it. You're asking me a question, I'm gonna have to research things. But no, it says he's just watching him, obviously, because he's amusing. He's going to give him a device, obviously, and he says that he can't send him anywhere besides the six-sided world. Now, is the six-sided world the world that he's on? Or is the six-sided world this idea of this six-sided dimensions of parallel worlds? Like, it can't mean that another side of this six-sided world is our world. Because again, he said that he can't transfer somebody from other worlds. That's something that the wicked dragon god is better at. It says specifically better at. but he says that he can't send anyone besides the six-sided world. So is a six-sided world this planet that he's on now that it has like 6 sides to it? Like it's not a globe, it's just got 6 sides to it. Is it 6 regions of a world that is circular? Or is it, again, this idea that there is this side that he's on, and then if you go over to this side of this 6-sided world, there's another world that could be, again, something like our world. It's very interesting. Again, this is one of those elements of like, I don't think the writer is doing this willy-nilly. That there's probably something really interesting behind a lot of that interesting way of explaining things, I guess. Now, you're asking about the different styles?
Yeah.
Did they ever have dragon?
I do remember them saying that there was 7 something involved with that.
There's the techniques.
1, 2, 3, 4,
There's 7
5,
there.
6, 7. See, and North God is the 7th. See, I'm curious as to if they're going to at some point.
But see, there's no man god there. So I don't think the strongest fighters.
No, I was
anything to do with that.
No, I was leaning more towards the six sides being, each one of them being a different thing. But if there's 7, that kind of throws that out the window.
That's do you think it has something to do with the languages? Because there's different languages with the connotation of God. So there's beast god, battle god, demon god. I don't think he mentioned any other ones though. Yeah, that's the only language that he mentioned was beast god, battle god, and demon god, and it's implied that battle god is human.
Well, my thinking was maybe each one of those are a reflection of some one of the sides, but there being 7 sides or 7 techniques or whatever the hell they want to call that would throw.
Well, technique was one of the strongest fighters.
Huh?
That was the 7 strongest fighters, and one of them was technique god.
Which it'll be interesting to see if one of them is technically not considered a real thing. So you have the dragon god, which would be one side. Then you have the man god or whatever. Which
and again, I'm assuming that the divine rank that Roxy initially talked about was god, like god rank.
You're right.
So those 7 techniques being technique god techniques. Those 7 fighters, including technique god and dragon god and whatever, that is divine ranked.
Well, are you following me on this? The 6 sides, and then there being 6 of them. The 7th one actually pop out and is actually not one of the 6. That'll be interesting if they actually do that, and then it would perfectly line up with the 6 sides. It was just something that kind of, for whatever reason, connected in my brain. I know I think things differently.
That's the struggle that I have, and it's like one of those things where I don't want to look into it all. Like when I'm like with the ranking systems there, it's like I kind of, or say I want to remember, did they mention Ghislaine was king or was she sacred or whatever? I fret Google searching because it's like you can so easily fall into something that's you're not supposed to know yet. Yeah, the 6-sided thing is like, don't even Google search it because you might fall into something. Again, it's so vague at this point, and I want to know, but at the same time, I want it to be revealed to me. What is the man god? Is the dragon god? Are those the 7 warriors that they've gotten so great that it's not just a rank, a quote unquote statement of power, but it's literally you have ascended to divine. Like you are now a divine being because you've gotten that good. Is it to that levels? I don't know. But it's like, I don't want to look it up. But yeah, that could be the case, is that when he's talking about, I'm the man god, and there's this wicked dragon god that is able to move, that is more equipped to move people from other worlds, whereas I can only move people to the other sides of the 6-sided world. Is that implying that he's of this side, and there's a side that is the dragon god side, and there's one that is the technique god side, and they each have their own side? And yeah, like you said, that technically there's another one that is outside of that realm. That would explain why nobody, that he says specifically he's adventured for a long time, never seen him, and that most people don't know what happened to the 4. The 4 highest ones, he's seen nobody record anything about them in so long. They don't even know if they're alive anymore. So there's so much secrecy around these beings that it might imply that because they're on this outside plane, this divine plane that they're outside of normal people. No. Could be. Or it could just be bad speculation, which I'm not very much so not known for, I guess. I don't know. Where the heck were we at? So yeah, after cutting off one of the dude's heads, Rudy's like trying to get him to stop, and eventually Eris kind of outbursts against him. I like the logic here because, again, this is another one of those moments where you don't really... I've always kind of tried to understand Eris and her mindset because it was so... They went out of their way to kind of show how Eris didn't respond to Ghislaine killing a bunch of guys in the middle of a street or an alleyway. She didn't really respond in any way when he cut the guy's head off. She's kind of like, and then walked away. And then at this point, it really does have her push against Ruijerd because Ruijerd won't listen to Rudy and what Rudy wants to do. Like, no, you don't want to kill people. It makes your name bad. All this kind of stuff. And the fact that he wants to work alongside them. He wants to use these guys to essentially take higher rank quests so they can make money quicker. And Ruijerd's not having this. He's like, I don't want to work with evil people. And he's like, if we're going to make it out of here, we have to use these people. And that's, when Eris kind of outbursted him. At this point, again, the Eris, protecting Rudy aspect is really shining heavy. But yeah, they end up basically forcing the guys to rank up and take higher rank ability or quests in order for them to make money quicker. And that's when Nokopotter starts snooping around. This is when we find out that, everything's kind of screwed up. As we get into episode 11 of the series, this is when we find out that, the entire region has been caught up in that mana disaster. Roxy shows up at the village and looks at the dead list, ends up not finding their name on there, finds a letter from Paul where Paul basically explains that, yes, he does have Norn with him, but everybody else is missing. And so he's doing a call out. He sent out this letter to many locations, including what we find out later, the Zanport. But yeah, this letter basically explains that the entire area is gone. He's heading to, he's going to the Mills continent, to Zenith's homeland. He's going to leave a message there for Lilia's family, and that he wants anybody that knows him, even if people that despise him, he's asking anybody for help to please help him find his family. And he's okay with them insulting him. And he'll even lick their boots if they want. But yeah, he's asking everybody to basically help them. So, and it listed as the Fatoa domain search team. So he's, again, kind of created this search group that goes out and tries to find people. But yeah, then Roxy at this point ends up meeting with Ellie and Talhand, and they pretty much go together to go to the Demon Continent, because that's where they decide to search first. This is where we get a scene where, I forget what his name is, this other group of adventurers, plus Rudy's team, plus these other guys, all apparently get the same quest to go search for this disturbance inside this forest, and everybody's getting slaughtered. Rudy tries to utilize the leaving people to the point of desperation before you save them to improve your image, and that didn't work out well. And people end up dead because he keeps Ruijerd from actually jumping out there and saving the children. So that doesn't work well for him. I guess that's that kind of aspect of, I don't know if it's a sense of thinking you have plot armor, but this idea that Rudy keeps running into where he tries to create this great scenario that he may have seen in a video at some point or some anime, and it doesn't turn out that way, and instead reality strikes him and it ends up with people dead. But I always kind of enjoy that perspective. But at the same time, that also hit home on the idea that while this group of, I think it was Kurt was his name, Kurt and his people knew the dangers they were getting into, and despite Ruijerd being upset at Rudy for essentially keeping him from saving these quote-unquote children, Kurt didn't want to be seen as that they are not children. They are adventurers. They went out there on their own, and it's their own responsibility for their own lives. And it does technically save Rudy a little bit in the idea that, look, this is what they chose to do. It's nothing to do with Rudy. As much as it does suck because it ended up with their deaths, this was their choice. It wasn't Rudy's choice. But yeah, returning back, that's when they run into Nokopotter again. Nokopotter basically kind of strong-armed those other two adventurers to force them to reveal what they were doing and that he wants half of everything they make, which, again, is not going to work out for Rudy because they'll never be able to leave at that point. So he's about to do something. He was about to use, like, it seemed like he was using his Saint, that Saint rank water magic ability that he used with Roxy for his graduation. So, like, the storm was kind of billowing up. And then it seems like Ruijerd steps in before he can get it off to just dump water on his head to reveal that he's a Superd and strangle Nokopara almost to death and tell him basically, we're going to leave the village. If we get to the next place and we're not adventurers anymore, you revoked our license, I'll come back and kill you, basically. So this would be the point they reference later when he's talking to Roxy that he turned over a new leaf because he had to run in with Dead End. So I did like that callback again. Everything technically is for a reason. But I think this is a good turning point because after this whole scene, Rudy ends up they end up finding Ruijerd outside the city because obviously everybody was chasing after him because he's Dead End. He runs into him later on. And he kind of notes the idea that Ruijerd at that point realized that Rudy, despite everything he says, has something that he wants to protect, which is Eris. And it kind of instilled this idea that he is a warrior because what is a warrior but somebody that has something that they want to protect. And so they kind of come to an agreement there that was the creation of the Dead End meeting. So every time before, Rudy was making all the decisions, and this is a point in which Rudy kind of accepts, look, we're going to come together and we're going to make decisions going forward with these meetings. So they'll basically hold meetings every time they want to decide on something. And that goes into part 2 of the series, in episode 12. So this is probably stuff that Chris actually wants to talk about because everything before then we've kind of talked about in previous episodes. So yeah, they basically are getting passage from Demon Continent to the Millis Continent, but it's extremely expensive. This is when the man god tells Rudy to basically buy some food, go to a back alley, and see what happens, basically. And that's when he meets Kishirika. I hate that name. Kishirika. Which seems to be the great emperor of the demon world. But yeah, he takes his food down that alleyway and she pops up. He feeds her and then she goes to repay him and she will grant him one wish, which he decides to be money. She's like, what do you expect from me? I'm penniless. I was starving on the side. What do you expect from me money-wise? He's like, well, okay, give me half the world. He's like, well, I haven't conquered the world yet, so I can't do that. He's like, well, okay, give me your body, I guess. And she's like, I guess I could do that. But no, wait, this incarnation has a fiance. I can't do that. So she denies that as well. He's like, well, what can you give me? And she's like, well, I'm the demon. I have these demon eyes, so obviously you'd want one of those. And he's like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And then that's when she basically pulls out one of his eyeballs and sticks in another eye into his eye, and it grants him the Eye of Foresight. So, Eye of Foresight Ghetto, I guess. But yeah, that was a goofy scene because she was very. I kind of equated her to something like Jahi, the great Jahi will not be defeated.
Yeah.
Whereas like the delusion of grandeur, like she's something greater than she actually is. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that's the first point in which he meets Gallus, because Gallus bumps into him in the middle of the street and he pushes him out of the way so that this pot doesn't hit him on the head. That's when we find out that, yeah, this Kishirika has 12 demon eyes within her body and that they can see that she can see through anything. That kind of explains the fact that when she used one eye that she had, like it does like a goofy like slot machine kind of rolling eye thing, and then one of the eyes stop, and then she said something like, well, that's disgusting or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it kind of implies at that point that she possibly sees his inner self that is inside of his mind, which is his old otaku self that the man god always meets him in. Because when the man god meet him, he's in his old self body, his 34-year-old self. And he's really disgusted by the fact that he's in his old self, and he's kind of really upset. And so whenever he goes back to his normal, or back to Rudy's body, he's always happy because he's not that chunky self that he was before. And he says, why do I look like this? And the man god says it's because how you picture yourself in your own mind. And so I'm wondering if she seeing through him, quote unquote, was her seeing that inner self.
Right.
I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see if they ever actually take the time to show that he shifts himself from seeing himself as that into seeing himself as Rudy instead.
I was curious if the same thing. As at some point, does it kind of slowly change over? At some point, he just accepts his new self, or maybe his inner dialogue starts to change over to the other Seiyu.
Right.
I don't know how they would explain that in the light novel perspective or not. So now having this Eye of Foresight, Rudy obviously has the ability to foresee things, and it seems like he talks about the fact that it takes, like, based on how much mana he pours into it, it increases the duration that he's able to foresee. And it seems like his comfortable point right now is 2 seconds ahead. So obviously he used this to train with, or at least test it out with Eris. And like we mentioned earlier, it was his point in which he gloats about the fact that he's able to beat Eris, but that doesn't really work well for Eris because Eris is just gaining some sort of confidence because she's able to beat Ruijerd in a duel one time because Ruijerd was obviously distracted by Roxy peeking in on them. But yeah, it was funny because at some point Eris is like really badly wanting to go out to find this demon because she wants one of these eyes too. But yeah, obviously he's wanting to get them off of this area and back to the main continent. So he's actually debating to sell the staff that Eris and the Boreas family actually put together for him. And that's when he's confronted by Ruijerd, who's like, this is an important thing to you. It's obviously going to fracture the party if you sell it. It's important to you just like this necklace is. And he points out the necklace from Roxy. And that's when Gallus appears. And Gallus shows up and apparently offers them the ability to get across to the Zant port by smuggling Ruijerd in. And that gives them grant to make it across the sea. And leave behind Roxy, who we know now is in this particular port town, trying to look for them at the same time. But yeah, the next episode we jump into kind of get a perspective of Roxy just arriving there. It was. I really did like this whole sequence because it was that whole aspect of the entire time it showed it from Rudy's perspective. You're noticing, Roxy run by. You're noticing like this lady moaning in the background. All these things that are kind of laid out. This wall being blown out. And this is where we finally get the perspective of Roxy and her team there playing out all these scenarios. At some point they end up kind of meeting together and talking about how they're looking for the rest of Rudy and the rest of the family. And at the same time, Ellie, who is with her, is sleeping around trying to get information. I don't know if she claims she's getting information while sleeping around.
Yeah, pretty much.
The elf is a little bit thirsty. I know. What is your opinion of Ellie? Like, at this point, I don't really like her. Like, because everything that has to do with her is sex. It's like, that's her whole thing is she just wants to bang men. And it's like, I really hope they get more into her because so far, that's all she talks about. And it's kind of like, is that her? Is that her? I don't want to assume that's that because the writer is a good writer. And I know that he's going to have something more for her, but so far that's all I'm getting.
I'm assuming that at some point that we're probably going to get more information on it, but as it stands right now, she's fine. That's I'm lukewarm on her, but like you said before, and this goes back into what I was saying before is I trust the writer to explain that at some point. I hope that it's a solid answer as to why she is the way she is. So, yeah. They have a little meeting. Well, first they kind of have this little moment where Roxy has a vision of her old party. That's when we first see Nokopata with her. We see several other people who we later find out is Hawkendale, which looks like a human boy, and Blaze, who looks like a large, like, orc pig-looking guy. And they eventually have a meeting together between Roxy and Talhan and Ellie where they talk about everybody missing. The rumors going around of this party that's called Dead End, how that party showed up about the same time the mana disaster happened. So there may be a connection there, but she doesn't quite make the connection at that point that it's them. She later runs into Eris and Ruijerd doing a training session, and that's when she panics, thinking this is a superb. I need to run away. That's when she finds Ellie making out with a whole bunch of men and blows out that wall. So again, there's that whole what happened there kind of perspective. And eventually they end up leaving the town and moving on to the next town, leaving behind this port where again Rudy leaves with them to Zant.
But yeah, it was funny the Rudy leaving on the boat with Eris and Ruijerd and having that, I guess, daydreaming of what this experience should be, where they go out and they get attacked by big squids and ghost ships, and eventually they get shipwrecked and they end up on an island together alone, and they have this romantic together with him and Eris, and then he snaps to it and it's Eris just puking in a bucket the entire time. So dreams and reality gets played out.
Yeah.
Dreams and reality. And of course the entire time he's struggling with himself because she's literally exposed at that point. But they eventually end up at Zantport, where, you know, he's like telling her, look, we're going to have to take another boat from here to the central continent, so get ready. But yeah, he leaves Eris behind to go get Ruijerd, who is obviously in this smuggling prison. And that's when we find out, well, we first meet the sacred beast that's locked up. We end up seeing that there's these other, how many was it? 6 beast girls, or beast children that are in this other cell. One's just gotten killed. He ends up running into Ruijerd, who's like, there's these beast kids in this other place. They killed one of them. Let me do it. Like, let me kill these people. Where he's like, this is not going to help the name of the Superds, but I can't really stop him at this point. So yeah, he allows Ruijerd to basically slaughter the entire place of all the smugglers. And eventually he goes to see the beast girls, heals one of them. The other one, unfortunately, is dead. And that's when they go to leave the place. And one of them stops and says, Nya! Meow, didn't you see this beast thing? Meow. And he's like, wait, she just did the meow thing just like Eris did. They actually do that. But yeah, they're claiming that the sacred, they say another one of them is still there as this dog, and it ends up being the sacred beast of this particular group, the Duldia. And so he goes back to save this dog. At the same time, ends up getting confronted by, as we find out later, Geese, who is Ghislaine's brother, who stops him, does a shout to kind of paralyze him, claiming that he was defiling the sacred beast because he was basically rubbing this soft dog. And so he takes the sacred beast and Rudy to Duldia, while at the same time we end up finding out later, the rest of them, including the chief, end up finding Ruijerd and all the other girls and Eris, where they all get together, kill the rest of the smugglers, almost get blamed for the whole smuggling ring by the Zantport, but then eventually come to Duldia later on. But yeah, that's when we get the Cribs Duldia edition with Rudy explaining his wonderful prison and how it's got all these amenities, great food, comfortable bed. Look at this fascinating toilet.
And you know that
great security.
That worked out really well, probably in the light novel, but that would have been, I'm sure that was a really hard scene to pull off, translated into the anime, and they did it phenomenally.
I just like how you hold the meat and he starts suckling on it. Like, this is so great. And security, obviously, because it's a prison and nobody really wants to get in there. But yeah, he's stuck in there. They kind of, this prison guard lady keeps giving him nasty looks. They won't let him explain the situation. They douse him with water every now and then. He's completely butt naked. And then eventually, yes, Geese. We finally meet Geese. Geese arrives. He's thrown into the prison as well. He claims that he was obviously shooting dice and was cheating. And so they threw him in the prison, which I think at this point we can assume it's just because he was looking around trying to find the people of the village. He's technically a part of the search party looking for these people that were displaced from Roa. But he doesn't really reveal that. He does ask Rudy what his name is. Rudy's like, yeah, I'm Rudius. And then he's like, name sounds familiar. I think that's the point which he connects that that's Paul's son, but doesn't really specifically say it. It was funny that the first encounter is like Rudy just laying on the bed, posing, and he's like, oh, welcome. So you're my kohai kind of thing. He's like, you're really confident for a naked person. I just love that whole scene. But yeah, eventually it gets to this point where Rudy's fed up and he's wanting to escape, and Geese is trying to stop him, but then they realize the whole town's on fire, which we find out that, yeah, Gallus essentially enacted all this plan to try to lure capturing the beast people, to lure the beast people out of Duldia to then follow them back to their hometown so where they can come in and capture more people because, as we find out later, yes, their whole thing is to capture beast people and sell them to nobles, which again, Rudy kind of connects to Saurus probably. It's probably Saurus and many other nobles that like, young beast people. So, but yeah, these bandits are attacking. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Geese is kind of like, look, this is our chance to escape. What are you doing? And Rudy's like, as much as these people didn't listen to me, as much as I don't like them, I can't let this continue on. So he does help them, and specifically using his rain spell, which ends up kind of dousing all the flames, which helps the beast people be able to smell so they can fight better. And they fight back, and eventually, again, they head to head with Gallus, who we end up finding out is the Saint North God style. Yes, he's using North God style, and he's known as North Saint Gallus, the Cleaner. So yeah, very, in perspective, yes, Saint, which is technically what Rudy is, but again, you can't necessarily say that means they're equal. It just means that they're equal in the ranking of their particular elements or their styles. So interesting to note, they kind of go at it. Like I said, it was kind of interesting retrospectively seeing that Gallus wasn't really necessarily taking on, or Geese wasn't taking on Gallus directly because you'd assume that Geese is strong, but necessarily letting Rudy, such a situation. It has this point in which it has Rudy fearful for his own life, allowing Gallus to leave. But then that's when the saint or the sacred beast jumps in, and that's when Rudy decides to attack. And that was like one of those moments of him going, well, can't turn back now. I fired at this guy. I got to win now. And so they go at it for a while. He nearly dies, even despite having his foresight eye. Gallus is so fast, he's kind of closing that gap to eventually pitting him in the corner. Geese, again, blinds him, and that allows Rudy to strike him finally with the final blow. But yeah, that was an interesting situation there because, again, it's similar to an earlier situation where he is debating just fleeing in the wake of the chaos, but he chooses, despite his fear of his own death, to fight back. Again, with Gallus, fearful for his life, knowing he's not invincible, debating to not fight Gallus, but rather let him go because he's not a hero. And I like that perspective because it's the flawed hero perspective that we, as a viewer, are like, these poor puppy people, this girl's screaming for bloody murder, like, please save me, and Rudy's not going to do anything. You almost feel like, gosh, Rudy, you're a terrible person. But at the same time, we don't see it, we don't put ourselves there quite yet in realizing it's because he doesn't want to die. He's not a hero. He's not invincible. It gives credit to the writer to have a hero that's not invincible and knows their own limits. Like, this guy can kill me.
And that's something that I do love about this writer. One of the biggest things that absolutely I've kind of hit on a few times that why I really truly love this show is it is character writing at its finest. These characters, almost nearly every one of them, are flawed in some way, shape, or form. None of them are perfect. They are all relatable in some way, shape, or form. Now, some of them are not revealed completely, so you're not completely sure that you'll be able to relate to them, but a lot of them are very, very well written. They're thought out. So when somebody does something, you can sit there and you can go, yeah, I may not agree with them. Like the what we're going to get into in an episode or two when we get to talking about the discussion between Rudy and Paul. While you may not agree with Paul or Rudy in whatever stance you take on that, you can at least take the time to understand that character. Because when it comes down to it, all of these characters are very well thought out.
Yeah. So yeah, after this, he kind of wakes up and he is inside of the chieftain's room. The lady that doused him on a regular basis, plus Geese, I think his name Geese, are both apologizing, which the way that they do that apparently is laying on their backs, which I'm like, you don't really want to do that in front of Rudy, especially not to the female. But yeah, that's when he finds out what all pretty much happened with Eris and Ruijerd. They're all apologizing to him, thanking him for saving them, and yeah, they're kind of stuck there for a while. It kind of felt like it was odd they didn't really explain this, but they technically didn't explain that they were stuck there. Like, there was a rain coming through that was flooding the area, and so they're essentially stuck there for quite a while. But yeah, it was kind of sad because at the end of that episode, they had Eris all excited about all the stuff that happened, and then he's like, well, it's a great story to tell the Boreas, and she's like, yeah, I can't wait to tell Soros. And then what does it cut to? Soros getting executed for not handling the man disaster properly and for costing the life of many people. And yeah, they claim that his servant Darius is going to be handling Fatoa going forward, which I don't know who Darius is, and I'm sure we'll probably find out later and probably despise the guy. But for now, that's all we know about that. But yeah, that kind of sucked because I really liked Cyrus. Like, honestly, I mean, his introduction was fantastic. Like, he just walks in the room and what did he say? He was asking Rudy, like, oh, you're the one that saved my daughter. And Rudy's like, no, it was Ghislaine. He's like, are you lying to me, boy? And he's like, no, it's just what Philip told me to say. And then he goes, Philip, come over here. And he punches him across the face. And it's like, no, we can't reveal that Rudy's here. Otherwise, it'll cause problems. Like, oh, okay, well, then that's good then. If Philip has a plan, I guess it's fine then. And then he's like, okay, well, you're going to train my granddaughter, aren't you? She's like, well, no, I kind of felt like Eris should probably ask him. And he's like, what? Eris, get in here. Yes, comes running in there. Yes, grandfather, what is it? You're going to ask him you're going to do it yourself or something like that. And so she does the whole nyan thing. And he's like, oh, that's so sweet. You're such a sweet daughter. It really did paint him as like this big teddy bear. Like, he's overbearing. He's loud. Obviously, he's violent, but he's just a big old teddy bear in the inside because when it comes to his granddaughter, technically, I guess, is really the thing. But yeah, he had an excellent intro, and obviously he has good taste.
He's a man of culture.
He's a man of culture. But unfortunately, yeah, that's the end of his story, which kind of sucks. Like I said earlier, I really did kind of want to get a little more insight into his decision not to do anything about the obvious building of this mana that he probably could have done something about. But that's, I guess, a story we'll never have, unfortunately. But yeah, this cuts through the whole situation with them hanging out in the Duldia for a while. Again, the rain's coming in, causing it to where they can't really leave. It doesn't seem like during this entire time Rudy really does anything besides peeping in on the girls as they're having fun in the water, and besides hanging out with the sacred beast, which they did technically have at some point. The lady that was the prison guard, she ends up showing up at some point and telling Rudy that the sacred beast appears only when the world is in peril, and when it reaches its immaturity, it will journey with the hero, or with a hero. And I was like, this is completely flagging that the moment they leave this place, the sacred beast is going with it. But it didn't. They left the sacred beast behind unless it's hiding in a shadow or something like that. So obviously, again, to the credit of the writer, it's not making it obvious that, okay, Rudy's obviously the hero. It could be somebody else. I mean, I don't really doubt at some point we will have a hero show up that the sacred beast goes with, and it's not Rudy. Like, there's nothing implying so far that Rudy has to be the hero of this world.
That's true.
It could be somebody else. The sacred beast could be here for somebody else who is actually the hero, and Rudy is either in the shadow. And what it's kind of like I'm trying to remember. There was a show here recently where we had that situation where there was a hero somewhere else doing things, and the character was in that world, but they weren't the hero. And you always kind of seen two perspectives. Every now and then you would cut over to seeing the hero do something, and then it would cut back and, oh, here's the actual main character. They're just in the world where the hero is doing something. So that was pretty much all we really got from the perspective of Rudy. It's just really him kind of just hanging around, making figures, hanging out with the sacred beast. From the perspective of Eris, I think it was pretty much both Eris and Ghislaine was really the focus of this entire segment because, yeah, the other person technically is Ruijerd. Ruijerd apparently the entire time was helping them with the flooding and apparently bonded with the chief because he essentially helped them prepare and prevent the deaths of anybody during that reign. Because I guess they insinuate that typically whenever they have reign of this kind of magnitude, it usually costs the lives of many of their villagers, and him helping them prevented a lot of that. So, but yeah, Eris obviously made friends with both Tona and Tersina. And obviously Tona is the daughter of Geese, who would technically be the niece of Ghislaine. She made friends with them while they were escaping from the smugglers. And eventually, what we find out is while they're kind of hanging out, Eris is teaching them languages, which was kind of interesting. At the same time, they note the fact that she has this ring that has this emblem of Doldia. And they're like, oh yeah, by the way, do you guys know Ghislaine? And Geese is like, yeah, that's that lady that betrayed us, and she's a failure, and she's terrible, and they kind of storm out. And Eris runs after them and says, how dare you disrespect my master? She's a great warrior. What are you talking about? And kind of what Rudy says is they obviously had a different experience with Ghislaine than Eris did. And as we find out through kind of them explaining the backstory, that Ghislaine technically, when she was in the Doldia village, she was like this feral person. Like, she didn't want to learn anything. She barely spoke their language. She would, outburst on a regular basis. And he regrets it, but they never really spoke. They never really tried to make a connection with her. Instead, the moment that this hero arrived, which again, we kind of mentioned earlier, they kind of gave up on her. They were happy that she was leaving. Like, we don't have to worry about this girl anymore. This guy's taking her away. We're happy. And they never seen her again. So hearing the stories about this great Ghislaine who ends up becoming a sword king and is, a strong warrior is completely, foreign to them. They don't even understand it. And Rudy explains to him the fact that, look, she even learned magic. She became a mage. I taught her, all this other stuff. She's become something even better. And this is, great for obviously Geese to hear, but at the same time, just doesn't seem like it connects. Like, this wasn't my sister. Like, what is she? She's become something completely different. And it ends up being a good thing because eventually he regrets the fact that he never reached out to her. And in return, he technically, when Tona and Eris get in an argument because Eris has to leave, he kind of pushes on Tona like, look, don't regret it like I do with my sister. Go see Eris kind of thing. So I really liked that episode because I don't think we really even got any kind of idea of Ghislaine as a person. Besides the fact that she was cool and she protected Rudy and Eris and she's an awesome fighter, we never really got a perspective of her and her life. And I think that episode encapsulated pretty much most all that we would want to know about Ghislaine, besides obviously what happened after she left the Doldia village, is probably a huge question mark at this point. Like, what did this guy do to essentially, I guess, tame the wild beasts, if you want to put it that way, make her into what she is now, a great warrior?
That's also a fascinating thing that they do this, and they've technically done this with both Ghislaine and Roxy, of seeing the backstory of a character from an outsider's perspective instead of Ghislaine, who is this is where you're what would they call it? It's from a narration of somebody else instead of their own personal bias. So Ghislaine, if somebody was to confront her and say, "Look, tell me about your entire backstory," it would be tainted from her own biases, and she would unintentionally cloud it from trying to. What's the word, where she would be changing the events to make herself technically look better. Granted, we don't know that Ghislaine would do that. That
she'd probably if she admitted that she ate crap. I'm thinking that she doesn't care about what people think of her, right. Her history. And that, if you're willing to go that far, I'm sure she doesn't care.
I agree, but
she may not understand that she was doing something wrong.
Right, and that's the thing is your perceived perception will always be clouded by your own judgment. And so when you try to retell a story, whether you intend to do it or not, you're going to be more likely to explain it in a way that will reflect better upon yourself. And So seeing something from somebody else's perspective, now technically their perspective on the situation is clouded by their judgment as well. So even though, yes, when all is said and done,
that's what Geese basically said was, I wish I tried to understand her.
Right. Exactly. It's one of those things that it's just a cool thing to see it from an outsider or a third party, their perspective of what was going on. So yeah, it's cool. And like I said, they did the same thing with Roxy, getting the entire backstory from her family's perspective.
Was it the family's perspective though? It was more just her perspective. I didn't really see a family's perspective in that situation.
Well, no, when they first went through the village, they did talk about it a little bit. They didn't tell the entire story until Roxy got in there and went to her village, and then they went back into why she had left.
I don't remember that part. But yeah, they eventually, once the rain subsides, this is a weird thing. So I don't know if you maybe caught something I didn't. I think the point was not to catch it, but when they go to leave, obviously you find out again that Ruijerd was helping them. They had a little buddy moment between him and the chief, and then obviously wanting to see what Ghislaine was able to do, Geese decides to challenge Eris to a duel, saying, "Show me what Geese trained you. Like, I want to see what Geese was able to do." And so they have a duel, and it's just like one exchange blow, and then Eris gets angry that she lost, and it's like, again, the moment where you have the same idea as Rudy, where everybody's like, "Oh, yay, that's great," and then Rudy's like, "What just happened? Like, how did she lose? What?" It's kind of one of those things. Like, I totally have to expect it to be something where he struck her in a place that would reveal something, and so she was hiding the fact that she's embarrassed. But no, it did nothing like that. It was just literally, okay, they obviously seen something he didn't. So maybe it's just him not being able to see how fast they struck or something, and other people being able to. So it's one
of those things that was shown. At least they acknowledged it by Rudy going, "I don't know what just happened."
Okay. All right. So we're doing that. All right.
Because think about how many times you've seen that in a show where the two characters clash, and then suddenly one of them falls over. Okay, I guess that one won.
I guess that one's blade hit. The other one apparently, unfortunately, used the wrong side of the blade. I don't know. Maybe that's what happened. But yeah, they leave the Doldia village. They head towards the holy country of Milis. That's when they end up kind of noting the fact that these streets were really well paved, or at least cleared out. And so Geese, having broken out from the prison cell, which again, by the way, I forgot to mention, Gallus survived, and he's apparently in the prison there. So I'm sure we'll see Gallus again later, because I doubt Gallus is going to have any problem getting out of that cell. I joked the time, because again, I didn't know who Geese was. I joked in my video that, well, some random thief guy broke out of jail, so I'm sure Gallus can break out. I didn't know it was Geese, so Geese is probably more important than Gallus. I don't know. He could be equal. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, they have Geese with them, and Geese is kind of explaining, the legend has it that the Saint Milis cleaved the roads, and yeah, so obviously Eris is like, I really want to learn how to do that. And that's when they pass by the monument of the seven great powers, and so they have the explanation that the monument is to kind of honor the seven strongest fighters of the world. And he said again, the order from 1 down is Technique, Dragon, Battle, Demon, Death, Sword, and North God. Ruijerd mentions the fact that when he was a kid, he used to dream about being one of them. But unfortunately, nobody's ever seen the top 4. They don't know if they're alive or dead. And that Geese adventuring has never pretty much met any of them. So they're obviously elusive or possibly just legends. He kind of shrugs it off as this is just folk, this is just tales. We don't even know if they're real, but he could be lying, because I don't really know Geese quite yet. Obviously, he continuously proves me that I don't understand who Geese is.
He's a rogue,
cool.
And yeah. rogues
mysterious.
Rogues, yeah.
Rogue's gonna rogue. Rogue's gonna thieve and rogue. He's not a rogue. He's a thief. Rogue and thieves are different, according to some groups. I don't know. Could be.
They're just rogues are more closer to spoony bards. So.
Moving on from there, we have this is where I honestly think this season has been this show progressively gets better. Because I think especially the last few episodes have been really strong. So it's kind of proving that this writer can continuously create more and more really fantastic storytelling. But yeah, moving on to episode 16. Again, they enter into Milcion, the capital of the holy country of Milis. That's when obviously Geese parts ways with them, and he mentions to Rudy, "Hey, make sure to go check out the Adventurers Guild. Can we nudge enough to, hey, there's a letter there for you. You probably want to read this letter that's at the Adventurers Guild. Just saying, you might want to read that. It's kind of important." But he doesn't, which is an interesting thought process. What if Rudy actually went by the Adventure Guild and read that letter? How would that conversation go with his father? Like, we probably wouldn't have had that argument at all.
Nope.
Because he would have known coming in there what was going on. And at the same time, I don't think the respect they built of each other would have happened. But I don't know necessarily if they built respect for each other through that whole ordeal. But I do think they came to an understanding of both what Rudy went through and how much Paul appreciates his son. So I think it was a good thing he didn't read it, even though there was a great deal of conflict that happened there. But anyways, that's for later. But no, they arrive there. This is the part where they pretty much have Eris decides that she wants to go do some goblin slaying jobs. Goblin slaying jobs. He has Ruijerd kind of keep an eye on her because obviously goblins are dangerous for females especially. At the same time, Rudy decides that he's going to write a letter to his dad, and that's when he hears somebody being kidnapped, so he decides to rush out there to help the person being kidnapped, because apparently kidnapping is big thing in Milis, I get, for some reason. But yeah, that's when he comes in there, finds the kidnapped person, they're feeding him, and he's hiding behind some boxes, and he finds a pair of pantsu and decides to wear them as a mask to hide his identity. And can further defile the name of Dead End by sniffing and licking it to provoke the Bikini Warrior to fight him. Constantly distracted by the Bikini Warrior's attacks, eventually some guy shows up and attacks Rudy, and we kind of find out it's his dad. And this is where we get the realization that his dad's there, Paul's there, and yeah, he's kind of like, you know, what happened, Rudy? What happened since the whole Mana disaster thing? And yeah, Rudy starts kind of talking about his great tales of adventures, all the things he's gone through, meeting the Superd and traveling with Eris and trying to get her back home, and all these crazy things that happened until eventually Paul gets angry and says, "Oh, so that's what you've been doing. You've just been screwing around having your little grand adventure while everybody else is suffering. That's great." Really kind of tears into Rudy for kind of underplaying everything, for him not finding the letter that he left inside of or he sent to all the Adventurers Guild, and that if he did read this letter, he would know that everybody's kind of suffering and that they're trying to find all these people, that he's got his priorities wrong. He's been just kind of helping this random demon while walking around with his cute, rich girlfriend.
Gallivanting.
But yeah, it's kind of this big, strong push that he had against him and for helping this rich girl. And then eventually, yeah, Rudy snaps back saying, "Oh, well, you're one to talk hanging out with this, you know, Bikini Warrior. Should I expect a new sibling soon?" And that's when Paul just flips out, punches him. Rudy gets him gets the counterattack in, knocks him down, starts punching him and telling him he doesn't know what he's been through. And then Norrin shows up, and Norrin pushes him off and tells him to stop bullying. Keyword, bullying. Stop bullying Dad, which kind of, you know, puts him kind of out there. And eventually, yeah, he kind of noticed the fact that, yeah, there was a letter that was sent out. The entire Buena village is gone. It's all been teleported by that mana disaster. Which immediately he thinks of Sylphy, like, oh, including Sylphy. He's like, again, you're talking about your girlfriend. What about your mom? What about Lilia? What about Aisha? Everybody else is gone. And yeah, they're all being pretty much, their whole group, this little kind of rescue group that Paul has created, is going out and trying to find people, because the sad thing that's happened is a lot of these people being displaced from this village who aren't warriors, they're not fighters, they're not mages, they're just villagers being displaced into the locations, including the Demon Continent. most of them are getting thrown into slavery. They have nowhere else to go, and they're being captured and sold as slaves. And so they're trying to, again, this was one particular case, was this bully kid that was the one that they were rescuing now. They're rescuing from them and trying to save them. And so, yeah, it's every perspective that Rudy has of this grand adventurer. At the same time, Paul was essentially suffering the entire time trying to find people, which we find out in the next episode as it gets into Paul's story. We find out that, yeah, when he was teleported, he had Norn in his hand, so he went with Norn. They try to get back to, the Buena village. Everything's gone. He creates a group that will go out and find people and rescue them, and eventually getting to the point where they're at this particular Millis town where Rudy shows up all super happy and having grand adventures while he's been suffering trying to find his family and find other villagers and seeing the suffering of people. Which, before Chris speaks in on this, Geese ends up showing up, pretty much tells Paul, look, I think you're expecting way too much of your son. He's just an 11-year-old boy. He's been through hell. You don't know what the demon continent is like. You've been in your central continent being all comfortable. This kid is, that place is dangerous. He's gone through some crazy stuff, and I think you should just be happy that your son is alive. What did you expect? Did you want him missing limbs? Did you want him dead-eyed? What were you expecting? What did you want your kid to come to you as? You should be happy. You should be together. If I was your son, I would cut ties with you and ditch, but, you have a chance to save it. So, your thoughts on this whole situation?
He also said something to the effect of, what was it?
Technically, the Superherd could have turned on your son and killed your son.
Yeah, he laid it out really, really well. I mean, it was almost my argument to a T. It's like, yeah.
What do you expect finding? You're obviously a drunk. It doesn't take a genius to see that you're pathetic.
Yeah. Oh, he didn't want you to worry. I mean,
yeah. Why was he so happy?
Exactly. It was a fantastic, just to a T. Like I said, my arguments. Exactly what frustration I had with that entire scene. I love the scene. Don't get me wrong. I thought it was fantastically well done. I mean, from the barbs that they threw these characters. Andrew had pointed out that Rudy was like, well, are you going to come? Should I be expecting a third sibling? I mean, that he knew when two people know each other really well, they have the ability to pierce the most vulnerable spots. I mean, so when you get into an argument with somebody that you technically really care about, exactly what's going to hurt them, and they will, and those jabs are the things that will come out as almost a defensive mechanism in a lot of cases. But what it does is it shifts the argument back into the other person's.
Well, that's like the
corner.
whole rich girlfriend comment was the same thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I really did love how human that argument was. And this goes back into what I was saying earlier. Each one of these characters are so well written that you can sit there and you can take the argument from both sides. And that's what I really truly loved about that scene. It just was so raw and just believable of, why didn't you go out and you're my son and you're so super smart. It was actually pointing out his own flaws. Yeah. He was pointing out his own flaws. I could not do this. I wanted you. I thought you could do it because I couldn't. You are supposed to surpass me. And
that was the thing that I noted when that first episode, because this is obviously, I just mentioned this technically 2 episodes. The first episode was really strictly the fallout that the two of them had and them separating ways. The second episode is when Geese shows up and basically tells Paul, look, I think you're overthinking this. I think your expectations are too high. But when the first episode came out, that was the thing that I was posing to everybody. I'm like, I'm sure there's light novel readers out there that know what's going to happen already. I'm sure there's people out there that see things from the father's perspective. I think there's people that see it from the son's perspective. I think it's very interesting to see this conversation right now, just from what we've seen so far, which is mostly Rudy's perspective, plus Paul's outburst. But it was this idea of, what if like the what ifs, all the questions at what ifs, like, you know, is Rudy again downplaying this whole situation? Should have Rudy seen that message? Is Paul right to be angry about him missing that message? Is Paul right for him having suffered for what I think they mentioned, like, it's 2 years that he's been searching for his family, just to have Rudy come in and say, man, all this great stuff that happened after suffering for 2 straight years, trying to find people and expecting everybody to be dead, or again, dead-eyed slaves, tortured probably by some noble. There's all these what ifs that Paul has in his mind. But at the same time, the big thing that kept popping in my head the entire time I was talking about it was, is Paul projecting? Is Paul projecting his own failures upon his son? I haven't been able to find anybody. I don't know where they're at. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fast enough. I can't find these people. I'm failing. I haven't been able to find Lilia. I haven't been able to find Aisha. I haven't been able to find Zenith. All these things that I have not been able to find. But here's my son, who's this genius of it. You know, he's 11 years old and he's able to cast spells without incantations. He's a saint magic, a water magic user. He's all these great things. He's befriended a stinking superd, and yet he's not helping me. He wasn't helping me this entire time, and he could have helped me this entire time. But that's not Rudy's fault. Again, the projecting aspect of him is that great flaw that we mentioned earlier, this flawed character side that I think was really interesting. I think the conversation that came from that whole ordeal was so fantastic. I think the one thing that probably upset people the most was me implying the whole harem mindset, which is the downfall of Rudy. And I don't think I'm wrong in that perspective. I don't know if I ever got your opinion on my statement on that, was this idea of, specifically when Paul says, you didn't see the letter, I left it at Zan. The letter said that the entire Buena village is gone. And what does Rudy say immediately? Including Sylphy? And he says, all you can think about is your girlfriend. What about your family? And what I noted at that time, based on that statement, was this perspective that Rudy constantly has, or at least the inner self of Rudy, like his original 34-year-old neat self, is that he's always caught up in this perspective of wanting a harem and building his magic powers and leveling up and all this goofy isekai tropes that would build in somebody's mind who's an otaku that is a neat that's now reincarnated. Is his mind immediately goes to his harem and not family. And I felt, and especially I think that second episode really did drill it in my head even further, is him finally not giving up on the harem mentality. I mean, he still likes Sylphy and he wants to help Sylphy. But more him realizing that the family that's before him, his father, his mother, is his family. And I don't think he really, I argue that it, based on inner dialogue that we've been given in the anime adaptation, my inner dialogue is usually about harem, you know, tsundere, otaku junk, and not so much about, like, I care for my mother. I miss my mother. I miss my father. Where's my father at? I miss my father. He does mention here and there, like, you know, I hope my parents are doing okay. I hope this or that. But his mind, usually inner dialogue wise, is more otaku-ish. And I think he's getting a realization that he needs to stop that because his parents are important to him. I think the moment that he does this whole thing with his father and saying, let's reset. Okay, get down, reach your arms out. I missed you, Dad. It almost felt like it almost felt like I want to fix this situation, but then it quickly turns into, wait, this is my dad.
Yeah, there was
like a realization.
He did it as a joke at first. Probably not a joke. It was probably more him doing like you said before, where he's manipulating people.
The lead up,
it changed him.
Yeah, the lead up to this was the bartender comes in and says, because his dad is basically apologizing. And he's like, no, it's my fault. I was making this a big adventure and everything. I should have looked at that thing. And the bartender comes up and says, hey, kid, I don't know what your guys' argument is or anything, but you should probably try to look at your dad's face. And he looks up and he sees this look on his dad's face, a look he's never seen before, which is hurting. And again, that calls back to his old statement about, you know, being first time he was a NEET, this guy came in and made a comment about being a NEET so that he can play video games all day. And he lashed out at him. But he realized this guy was trying to help him. And he was trying to reach out, and he keeps lashing out and saying it's other people's faults. But this is a point in which, yes, once he realizes the face his father's giving him, again, I don't think it's necessarily him like going, let's just fix the situation. It's really he's hurting. We need to fix the situation. Let's reset it. But like I said, it felt like it wasn't, I want to make amends for my father because I love my father, but I think it turned into that.
Yeah.
Like it transitioned. And I love that. I love it. Like I said, I don't necessarily think that he's just a Taku mind all the time, but I think in my perspective of watching the adaptation, it feels like a transition from that mindset to this is my family and I want to help my family.
As for what you were saying, I do think that he is probably clouded by that in a lot of cases.
Because it always seems like it's in his head.
Yeah.
Always.
It's one of those things, it's like, it's frustrating to... Like that scene is an excellent example of where I pretty much stand on it is I think that he understands what he's supposed to do and he's playing the part in a lot of cases, and then he's surprised at how he reacts to it when he does do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, he's playing the part, he's playing the game, he's doing all the things, he's trying to perfect his harem, he's trying to perfect his techniques. So he's literally playing the game. And then when something happens that is a truly human moment, it affects him and he doesn't realize how much it affects him. Like the argument with his dad. I think that was one of those where it was a moment similar to the hug where he was playing the game, he got frustrated because it affected him in a way he wasn't expecting it to affect him, because human emotions are different. And
he's literally learning it.
Yeah,
he's been a NEET for 20, over half his life. He was a NEET.
Exactly.
He doesn't know how to interact with people.
Exactly.
So I'm not, and what I kind of came back with, because again, a lot of people were upset with my perspective of that, but like it's a perspective of adaptation. What kind of clues me in on that is both the aspect of you seeing all of his inner dialogue is that. It's like you said, I think you put it perfectly, the playing the game. He's playing the game, but you don't realize it's because he's been stuck in a state of not interacting with people for 20 years, over half his previous life. And now suddenly he's having to interact with, and I think Sylphy was a great example of that first nudge that he needed, because it's a good thing he didn't know that Sylphy was a girl, because I think he would have been more difficult to interact with a girl. But because he thought it was a boy, he was able to get in there enough to get comfortable with Sylphy. And then when, of course, the switch happens, he's like, oh, well, I still want to be with her. And it's always this kind of slow nudging out of his comfort zone into this other world. And he keeps putting it. That was, I think, what was it? I think it was his birthday. He mentions the idea that he wants this life to be different. This was his chance to make a different life of himself. And he's going to try. And he keeps falling back into the otaku. He keeps falling back into, yes, his goofy otaku desires that I think anybody that's a super otaku is going to have the same feeling in if they were in another world. I think Norn's a good example.
Shoot, don't put me in another world. Harem time now.
Norn's a good example because Norn is, what does he say initially? He's all about becoming that big brother. And again, I might be overthinking it, but I think, again, it's in that perspective of his inner dialogue. I think at that point, he's like, I want to make a little sister that I dote on, that eventually is the one that keeps saying Oni-chan or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think eventually it's going to get to a point where he realizes that Norn is something else. And Norn is my sister. I want to help her. And I know that's eventually going to get to that point. And I can't wait for it.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that it builds, is this idea that it initially starts out as, haha, I'm going to have Sylphy be this Shota that pulls in all the girls, and eventually turns into, I'm fearing for the safety of Sylphy. I want to help Sylphy. It starts off with, I want to break the Eris's tsundere. And what does it turn into? I want to get Eris home. I want to protect her. Yeah. I want to keep her safe, even though most of the time Eris keeps him safe.
Yeah, and
it always starts off. It always starts with otaku, and it ends in relationship.
Exactly.
And that's always been a great thing about Rudy.
I think we broke the entire show. We figured it out. He's playing the game and he doesn't realize how much. until it affects him.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't explain that properly when I did my video talking about that perspective. Like I said, the statement about Sylphy and him thinking about his stupid girlfriend all the time, his stupid harem. But my point was exactly that. It is the playing the game and realizing it's life.
Yeah.
It's playing the game of life before you realize it's not a game. That kind of stuff, so. Anyways, but no, that scene with his dad, the moment that guy said, you should look up, son, I think you need to see his face. I was like, ugh, yeah, there's the pain face. And he tries to correct it. Like his dad tries to hide the face. He's like, what face did I give? What face did I give? And then it turns into the hug. I think the hug was, so good. Like, it's so good. Like this show is so good. That kind of stuff just, it kills me. It really does kill me. And I think it's just appreciating what you have in front of you. Like the whole thing there was, and I think that his father says it's like, I thought I lost you. Like he didn't. That was that's literally how he puts it. It's like that was what they should have done. Like let's reset things and let's put this let's play this out as if this is what should have happened. The moment you seen me, you would have come down so that I can reach you. You would have held your hand, and I would have hugged you, and we both should have said, "I missed you. I'm glad you're safe." And they play that out as that reset. And the way I put it in my impressions for that second part was, it's so great because that previous episode, we had that conversation of who was right and trying to see things from both perspectives. What does Paul see? Paul's frustrated because he's gone through all this crap and his son's having fun. From Paul and from Rudy's side, it is, I don't want him to worry about me. I want to tell him about these grand adventures, all these great things that I've gone through. I don't even know what's happening in Bueno Village.
I had no idea. Exactly.
And yes, I misspoke by saying Sylphy before Zenith. But it doesn't matter in the end. Because what he does is what exactly should be done, especially when it comes to people that you love. Hit that reset switch. It doesn't really matter. In the end, it doesn't really matter. And I think that moment right there encapsulated that idea of it doesn't really matter in the end. Move on. This is the now. What should we do? Where's Zenith? Let's go find her. Let's go find Lilia. Let's go find the rest of them because that's what's important. It was good. It was so good. And yeah, following that, when they separate ways, Geese kind of mentions the idea that he was going to go check out some other areas. That's pretty much the point where we clue in the idea that Geese has been helping them find the people. Norn getting the head pat from Ruijerd, which was great because again, Mother told her that the soup bird's going to eat her. It was good. I kind of wish there was some kind of connection between Rudy and Norn at that point, but I think the two of them are just going to be.
It actually makes me more fearful because I think you're right that there's going to be a moment of a doting Emoto and he's at some point going to, just like we were saying, he's going to have a human moment with her. And this thing that sucks is how is that moment going to happen? Because for that to happen, Paul would not be able to protect Norn, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah, it begs the question because that's exactly what's going to happen. Is they're probably going to be separated for a couple more years now and I think that's a nice thing that this writer is doing, and the fact that it's a full life story, it seems like at this point.
I will point this out: kids in this world grow like weeds. Because she's 4 years old and she looks almost like Rudy did when he was like 4 or 7.
Yeah, it was technically 4 when Roxy was training him. The idea that this story kind of spans such a long lifespan of him in this other world is nice because you have that idea of it eventually getting to a point where it's probably going to be several years before he meets up with Norn and Paul again. Because we've already seen, like, every time there's, like, a separation, it seems like a span of upwards of 2 more years happens before people meet up with each other again, which is technically true to something of a setting like this. It's not like people jump in a plane and they fly to the Demon Continent. It's a several-month journey to go to places. They've mentioned it, like, with Lilia. Going to her home, it was going to take a month travel. It's kind of like the olden days of, carriages and stuff. It takes a long time to get around places. And so it's not going to be a surprise that we'll have several years pass before he meets up with Norn again. He might be 20 years old before he meets her again, and she's what, like, I don't know, 16 or something.
16, roughly.
It's that kind of a time span. So at that point, yeah, he's probably gonna be like, "Oh, it's my little sister. Let me dote on my little sister," and she's gonna be like, "I don't even know who you are. I've never, you know, I don't know what kind of person you are. I know that you're supposed to be my brother, but I don't know you." And that's kind of sad.
Last time I interacted with you, you were beating the crap out of my dad. So
yeah. Well, I think she'll be a mature enough to know that that's not really the case. But you'd hope that Paul would at least kind of explain like experiences with Rudy or something like that. But yeah. But again, it's not like when they were traveling around trying to find people that Norn's like, "What does my brother look like?" "Well, let me hold up the cell phone with some cute pictures of him when he was younger." It's not that. It's not this world. She would never know who he is. It's impossible because again, she was technically an infant when he left. So, yeah, yeah. This jumps into Roxy's episode. I think. Are we already?
And on top of that, you make a superb pet her on the head.
Yeah,
her entire interaction with Rudy was pretty scary if you think about it.
Yeah, she didn't really get any good experiences with him, unfortunately. Which I don't really know what happened exactly after. It went from literally him hugging his dad to boom, everybody's separating. It's like, could you just hang out for a little bit and talk to Norn?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be cool to establish some sort of bond there before you all separate again for another 5 years until you meet each other again. But yeah.
Well, Rudy will probably learn how to teleport.
Yeah, he needs to get his OP Isekai teleportation ability that allows him to see all of his harem members quickly, and then start making them cry by leaving. Yeah. So Roxy's episode, it kind of opened up with Ruijerd, like you mentioned earlier. Ruijerd going around and them traveling from Milis to, I believe they were going to, they're still on technically the Milis continent, so they're trying to get to the next port to go to the central continent. And as they're traveling, they end up having a bunch of people challenging to Ruijerd to duels, which again, he just beats them all. They eventually get on a boat to go to the central island, so they're now on a boat. Thankfully, thanks to his dad's connections, they were able to have Ruijerd not have to be in a prison cell below the boat or anything like that, so that's a good thing. Yeah, I kind of mentioned the idea that thankfully they'll be on the central continent, so the roads are going to be a lot more easier there because, I guess we mentioned earlier with Geese, central continent people have it easy. They can take it easy, but they're still going to work on improving supers. I forgot to mention that. That was one of the goals that Rudy had created when they went to that the Milis the Milis kingdom, was that his whole plan was that they were going to go out, do jobs because Milis paid more, do jobs, and as soon as they completed the job, they were going to reveal that they were dead end and give them a statuette of Ruijerd. So what happens when they separate ways with Paul and Norn and all them is they give them the statuettes. So they all have super Ruijerd statuettes. But yeah, they're going towards the central continent. So I think that's pretty much where they left them in episode 18, as they were still on the boat going to there. He was talking about him being excited to finally see Roxy again because he thought that she was still in the Shirone kingdom, which obviously we know she's not. And that's when it cuts to Roxy. And that's when we get an entire episode of Roxy, which, man, it's been so long. I wanted one. But yeah, she's meeting with Nukapara. And this is when we find out that, yeah, apparently Nukapara was a part of her original party. She's talking about how Blaze is dead and unfortunate kind of thing. I don't remember what she said about Hawken, if he's still alive. I think she just mentioned that Hawken always admonished them. So I'm assuming that he's still alive because he just mentioned Blaze was dead. So they're talking, reminiscing about the old days, how she used to always try to fight to look mature because everybody looked down on her like a kid. And yeah, he mentioned that I think Nukapara mentioned that he had children when Ruijerd was going to kill him. But yeah, he has kids and a wife, and apparently his run-in with Dead End led him to fix his way of exploiting adventurers, to teach them lessons, as he says. And then eventually he mentions the idea that she needs to go back to her hometown and stop dwelling on her insecurities about what happened. And eventually that leads her to decide to do it. So she goes back to the tribe of the Migurds, and Really quickly, we establish the thing that I don't think they really technically mentioned up to this point of why Roxy left, or at least one of the reasons, and that is because Roxy cannot communicate the way that all the other Miggers do. So the moment she arrives there, she looks over and sees these other villagers, and they look over at her, and you see nothing but, you hear nothing but like a crackle noise, and there's like these little spark effects happening around them as if they're trying to communicate to her, but she can't receive the signal. Like there's a break in the telepathy when they're trying to speak to her. And she eventually runs into some kids that scrape his knee. She heals them, and then they try to talk to her again, and they can't, and so she leaves. She eventually goes to her parents, which her parents are there, and they're obviously super excited to see her. They immediately speak to her with spoken word because they know that she can't hear their telepathy. And this is like the best scene in this entire episode, in my opinion, is the moment they greet her, they're like, "Oh, we're so happy you're here. Come on in. How long you stay?" And they go over there to the fire, and they start making the fire, and they immediately start talking to each other with telepathy, and she can't hear them. She immediately goes, "Look, I can't really stay, so I'm going to leave." And she goes to leave, and they're like, wait, stop. Where are you going? I love that scene. I think that scene was, like I said, it encapsulated everything of what Roxy's dealing with, which is that alienation. Like, even her own parents, she doesn't want to say anything like, "Hey, look, I'm in the room. Can you talk to me too?" She can't understand them, and yet they're having fun talking to each other, but they're not doing it maliciously. That's the sad thing. Is it's like she's extremely hurt by the fact that she finally comes in this home. Somebody speaks to her. Her parents speak to her. She can see her parents, but then the moment that they walk away from her to prepare a fire, they immediately stop talking to her. And they, again, not intentional, but it's exactly what she left for, which was that alienation.
And it's very true. I mean, I love the fact that you had pointed that out when you were discussing it. I think it's such a powerful scene, in the fact of, because I think I've mentioned it before, of one of the books that I had read at one point got to talking about what the writer, at least, had in his world, he had talked about what he called a heart language, which is basically your most natural language. So us growing up, we learned English. So our heart language would be English. So if we ever learned more languages, our native language would always be English. And that's one of the things that this scene kind of shows, is basically a heart language, where their native language is the telepathy. What that language is in their telepathy, you don't know, but their language is telepathy. Her being unable to communicate in that language, or it would be similar to two people. There's one person who's deaf, who cannot hear the language, and two people who know sign language start talking to each other, and the person that is deaf is left out of that conversation, unable to get involved in that conversation. They would naturally feel alienated, while those two people never intended on the deaf person feeling left out of the conversation. It's natural because they're using their heart language. They're communicating the way that they are most comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people that do sign just naturally will do it as they talk to somebody. And I think that's like a nice habit to have, especially if you have somebody near you that's, on a regular basis near you that won't be able to hear it. And like I said, that's just pretty much exactly what I got from it, was that they just naturally flowed into that because that's what they always do. And that kind of transitions into the whole backstory, where she finally notices that, as she's leaving, her mother's like, I hope that you'll drop by every 20 years. She's like, well, maybe every 50 years. And I'm like, geez, these people live too long. Again, I think they mentioned that they live, if nothing goes wrong, upwards of 200 years. So I guess it's more natural for them. But as her mother starts crying, she notices all the stuff on the wall that her mother created, or they made for her, including the book that taught her language, and this little horse thing, this doll. And it gets into the backstory of them, yes, teaching her how to speak, because obviously she can't use telepathy. She's going to learn how to speak. So they teach her I'm not, again, it doesn't really specify if their telepathy is using demon tongue, and it's just the transportation of that information is to telepathy. I don't think they really implied that McGirds have like a specific language through that telepathy, but it could be. But they had to go out of their way to teach her spoken language, because we've only really seen the chief speak spoken language. The chief, her parents, is the only people we ever see actually speak a language. Everybody else is just using telepathy because that's all they really do. So it implies they went out of their way to teach her this, and so they had to do this just so that she had a spoken language that she can use. And eventually that led to her having a run-in with, the villagers and going, "Hey, how's it going, guys?" And they're like, "What?" And then sparkles happen because they're trying to speak to her like, what? And I think if everybody learned spoken language, they would probably reply to her in spoken language. But no, they all just speak through telepathy. And so this obviously alienates her. She feels like her parents are suffering because she can't speak through telepathy, so she decides to leave. She leaves the village and goes out on an adventure and leaves them behind. So it was really tragic, because I think even equally with the whole scene where she goes and speaks to the people, it's kind of like, again, I kind of equate it to probably something like somebody that is deaf or something. I think it's really tragic, this idea of confronting a bunch of people and trying to communicate with them and you can't. I mean, it's something that we're dealing with Ranking of Kings, that idea of somebody that just can't speak to anybody and just wants somebody to talk to them, and they can't find that person to talk to, and how alienating that feels, not having that communication and being that outsider that she kind of felt like she was. She felt like she was broken. She felt like she was an outsider. Something was wrong with her. And that was, really, really sucked. And it was really a really powerful episode. I mean, equally with after, everything kind of breaks down and she realizes how much her parents loved her, how they were keeping that stuff for her, and having this small bonding moment with them was really fantastic. So poor Roxy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she wakes up the next morning and they end up finding out that, oh yeah, by the way, I have to leave still because I have to find my kohai that, or my apprentice that looks up to me so much. And that turns into her pretty much, then going, "Oh, that's right, we did meet your apprentice," or somebody that said they were your apprentice. His name was Rudy and he was with the Superd. And she's like, "What? Superd? He's with a Superd? Yeah, we used to think he was dangerous, but he's actually a good person." But yeah, that's when she finally connects the fact that he is the group that is the dead end. And so she obviously feels that he's safe.
I love the way that she, after she realizes that it's that group, she turns around and she's like, "I should have figured this out." That's so Rudy to do that.
Only Rudy would do that. Only Rudy would claim to be dead end and walk around with a Superd. So yeah, she's pretty much like, they're like, "So are you going to go see your apprentice?" And like, "No, I think he's fine. He'll be fine." But yeah, she pretty much continues on in the demon continent trying to find the others. He says that, still got to find Zenith and Lilia and Aisha. So she just crossed off Rudy off the list. I'm like, again, I think Zenith is okay, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, that was good. It was a really fantastic episode. I think the last 3 episodes have just been so good. Like, I'm kind of at this point now where I feel like it's all downhill from here. Like, how can this writer continue to do like fantastic writing like this? It feels like at some point it's gonna reach from now on it just kind of lulls down. Like, at some point the writing's got to get less cool, but I don't know.
It is a wonder. I obviously we have great material here. And then you stop and you think about, okay, so is this just a combination of all these things coming together to make such a fantastic show, or who should we give the credit to this show? It's such a fantastic show. I mean, listening to you talking, how do you quantify and decide who gets the credit for the show? It's great material. It's a great, there's great directing. There's the script, the series composition is fantastic. The animation is fantastic. Outside of a hit and miss here and there, pretty much everything looks, between the background arts, the foreground arts, the music composition is fantastic. I mean, there's so much going for this show. It's hard wonder that why anybody would not be going crazy over this show.
I think it's a culmination of all of it. Like, it all comes together to create what I think makes this show what it is. It's immersion. There's nothing more connecting than immersion. If you can have that immersion where you feel like every episode that turns on, you're just lost in it. You don't feel like you're a bystander. You're literally watching the story unfold, and you're kind of there with the characters watching it happen. It makes it more of a connection. Despite the fact that you'll see Rudy perv out about something, you're like, dude, the licking of the underwear was just that you went over the edge there. You still watch it because that's just Rudy, and you're like, okay, I can't go with you on that one, but go get him, dude. You're crazy. Every character is just there. I mean, yeah, granted, you mentioned earlier you pretty much relate to everybody. I can't relate to Ellie and her super thirst for getting on with five guys, but I understand her, I guess. She likes the smell of sweaty men. She's going for it. Okay, good, go for it. The connection's there with all the characters. And again, I think you have the great animation. You have the spectacle that it is, the visuals, the audio. You feel the passion of the studio and director working on this. They obviously, we mentioned the fact that the director really wants to do this project, or was the producer. They really wanted to do this. They wanted to do the entire thing. And so you see that passion with the creators and what they're putting out there. They're not messing around with the product. They're doing it justice. And you feel that passion in it. Equally with the fact that the characters are great. I think pretty much the thing that I've been hitting on a lot lately is the lack of not wasting characters. That every character that shows up on the screen is important somehow, in some way. Again, Nokopara, Geese, these characters that I felt like were throwaways. Gallus, even when Gallus first showed up, it just, okay, he's gone for an entire episode and then suddenly shows up and he's a dirtbag and you gotta kill him. And he probably will still be around, as he's apparently not dead. It's the Sacred Beast we mentioned earlier. You thought that he was going to be, okay, well, he's going to follow Rudy, obviously. No, what if there's another hero? What if there's an importance to that conversation that's going to come up later? The seeding of stuff, like crazy seeding of stuff.
Did you
pointing
say,
out things and then later on realizing that there's some significance to it? Like I mentioned before, Ghislaine showing her eye at the time didn't know what it was. Now we know what it is.
Did you say that at some point that there was more than just Rudy got hit by the truck?
They said specifically that there was. They didn't note that anybody else was injured. They said they found there was 2 students and 3 were missing. But no, it never said that was anybody else that got hit. I think I wrote it down.
It might have been in your notes or something. I just remember that coming out of nowhere, and I was like, wait, I don't remember that at all. So maybe those characters will pop up as heroes at some point. That'll be interesting.
Okay, to your point, specifically they said the reporters or the police were saying this guy in his mid-30s got hit by a truck. There was 2 other students that nearly got hit. They're missing. What's the odd thing about that statement? There was 3 kids. Technically, 2 other students was nearly hit, and they're missing. So that claims that the 2 students were nearly hit and they probably ran away. But there was 3 students there. There was a girl and a boy. They were arguing, and there was another boy trying to stop them from arguing. I don't know. Maybe that's me just reading it, and that's going to be into something else, or maybe that's just.
Well, I'm definitely reading into it.
There's your other hero. But again, all it takes is the wicked dragon god to say, "Hey, I'm going to take both of them." It could happen.
And it's one of those really fun things that could turn into something later. Might not be anything. Like I said, we're reading into it.
Yeah, and I think it can. If it does turn into anything, it would be a thing where I'd want them to just jump into their life and show what happened from that perspective for a little bit before coming back, because I don't think there would be any significance to it if suddenly just out of nowhere Rudy he's now 13 or something like that, running into a random, I don't think he's 13, I think he's 11. Him at 11 running into some random person, them going, "Oh yeah, I was a isekai too." Shrug. Like, what does it matter to him at that point? Like, what importance does that have unless they want to tell that different story? Or yeah, maybe the wicked dragon god was like, okay, I keep calling wicked dragon god, and that's technically was a description. The dragon god is like, let's throw these two on two different sides of the plane and see if they'll end up running into each other. Again, that aspect of amusement.
I think it would. I think that to your point, it would be uncomfortable. It would be an.
No. They were all there because they did show the one boy was being patched up by an ambulance. They were saying that two were missing, so the other two ran away. So never mind. That's stupid. They're all there. They're all accounted for. Well, they're saying they're missing. So that could mean that two of them transported. So there's three people there. One girl, two boys. It cuts to showing one of the boys was being patched up by an ambulance, and they said the other two are missing. So obviously the truck driver or the boy said there was two others with me, a girl and a boy, and they're missing. So that could mean there's two people transported.
Right. And the cool thing about that, going to what you were saying a little while ago, them just running into each other, obviously they're not going to just flat out go, oh yeah, by the way, I'm isekai. They're not going to do that.
Right.
So it would lead towards something else would be kind of their connecting point. So the two of them could meet via the sacred beast, which would be an interesting way for if one of the other ones was the hero, pops up and bumps into Rudy at some point, and the sacred beast sees him and goes ballistic, and then they have a connection for a moment. And then they could start the discussion, some kind of a discussion. How isekai would come into the discussion, I don't know. Or they might end up hating each other and never even liking each other, and then they end up bumping into each other a few times, long before they ever get to the point where they actually talked about being isekai. So,
and that's the other thing that also brings up is the aspect of would they be blessed in some way? Because it never at any point says that Rudy is blessed in any way.
True.
He does have the man god watching him, and the man god tells him to do things that end up favoring him in certain ways. Like technically, he wouldn't have the Eye of Foresight unless the man god said to go down this alleyway and feed this thing or take some food with you.
And the man god does have an interest in him because he finds him entertaining, not necessarily that he wants him to succeed more than any other person. Yeah. So if another character doesn't go out of their way for anything, they could be a complete bum in the middle of the street that just so happens to be the hero, and the sacred beast is following him around. So we don't know. I mean, and Rudy might activate him and make him decide, because seeing as how Rudy seems to make people want to compete with him, makes the random bum decide that he wants to be the hero now. So it's one of those things that's really it's a lot of fun to think about. The idea of those two extra characters being isekai as well, why that's such a fun concept is because of how it changes the dynamic of everything, because the isekai is considered the main protagonist, quote unquote protagonist, quote unquote hero, usually in these isekai shows. So to have another character that is aside from the main protagonist, who's obviously a isekai as well, but not necessarily, we don't know that he's necessarily the hero right now. At this point, we don't have a hero that has been specifically designated outside of, we have a protagonist who is a flawed character who is running along this road that may or may not turn him into a hero.
Yeah. That's the thing I've always enjoyed about it is I don't really want it to be forced in that direction. And I think there's plenty of stories out there that kind of do that, where I think a lot of storytellers are willing to kind of say, look, this person isn't the strong. This person isn't, in the forefront. They ain't overpowered. They're not the obvious choice. And I think Tsukimichi is an example here recently. He's technically the bad guy in this particular world. And I like that. I like that idea of being willing to say you're not just the overpowered main character. Now, granted, he does have an affinity. He obviously does he's pushing the boundaries of what he's able to do. He was granted knowledge technically early on. That is his benefit is having knowledge early on. He has smarts to think out a process, and he was going out of his way in order to capitalize on what he has. He says, I'm technically young, so I'm able to absorb this information quickly. I'm going to learn this stuff now. When he was learning his language, he's like, man, this body is able, this mind is so young, it's able to absorb this information, so I can learn this language really quickly. Let me take advantage of that now. I obviously know that the magic exists. Let me keep using magic over and over again to see if I can build up my mana pool. Maybe that will benefit me later. He's not going out of his way to do some crazy thing to gain power, but he's technically pushing his limits early to gain an advantage. It's not an insane advantage. It's not being overpowered. It's not having max skills or max stats. It's just getting that little step ahead that he needs in order to get some sort of benefit out of it. So it's good stuff, though. I'm super excited about where this is going. Obviously, Roxy's still on the Demon Island, and I'm sure, or Demon Continent, so I'm sure we'll probably still get plenty of that particular world. Did it imply that Paul was? I know that Geese said that he's going to continue to look in the Demon Continent because he said, obviously I've checked here, I've checked the Great Forest, I want to check some other places. So it seems like he's going back to the Demon Continent. Paul, I don't know if they imply that he's going there.
I think he said he was going south. Because Rudy's going north, he's going south. That's, if I remember right, where he was going.
The Millis is the southern continent, I believe. The Demon Continent's to the east. I don't know. Did he say specifically south?
I know that Rudy did specifically say he was going north, and
that would take him to the central continent. I don't know. I think Paul said he was going somewhere, but I forget what exactly he said. I think it was kind of interrupted by Geese saying where he was going. So the assumption he's going to Demon Continent because I think Paul needs it. I think Paul needs to go to the Demon Continent so he can get an awakening there. But I don't know. It just seems like everything points to the fact that everybody's in the Demon Continent. It's like everybody's going to the Demon Continent. Roxy's going to the Demon Continent. Geese is going back to the Demon, or Geese was at the Demon Continent, assuming, or he's just going there.
I kind of think that Paul needs to stay away from Ellie. Honestly,
stay away from Ellie.
I think that would probably be a bad mix.
That was a funny conversation.
I have my speculations on Ellie and why she is the way she is, and I have a bad feeling it has something to do with Paul.
No, that was the funny conversation because when Roxy asked them about Paul, both Talhand and Ellie were
he's scumbag.
Yeah, he's scumbag. And it was like, wait, Ellie, who is like super thirsty, and Paul, who technically is super thirsty. Why is there a problem there? All I can think of is that Paul turned down Ellie. That's all I can come down to is I wonder if Paul told her no. She's not her taste. Like he doesn't like elf chicks, or maybe he doesn't like.
No, I would think that he
likes girls that somehow fight hard.
He probably somehow made her into a horn dog, and that's what messed.
She's trying to find that guy that will please her like Paul did.
Well, I wasn't going to go that far, but yeah, something he did messed her up, and that's why she is. And that so to answer
my idea is funnier. That he literally said no to her, and now she's ticked off at him. Like the only guy that said no to her was Paul. I don't know. I'm sure we'll find out that.
And so she's trying to just sleep with everybody to get him back.
Do you think?
Let's go with that.
Do you think we'll get that moment where we get like maybe a couple episodes or something? Probably an episode at the most, or at least a section, a chapter on
their backstory. I think so.
Yeah, the 6.
Because like I said, there is one thing that Geese. There was a moment involved with Geese that I think was actually kind of an important key. It's not like groundbreaking or anything like that, but it's something.
My question is it necessary? Do you think it's necessary to get their backstory?
I think so.
Because I don't think the writer's going to do it unless there's some story that needs to be told there. Like we need to know something about Zenith or something, of why Zenith is the way she is or something. Because I think of all of them right now, the biggest one that has the most mystery is Zenith. We don't really have an idea of like how strong she is. We don't have an idea of how smart she is, what she's gone through. Ghislaine, we have a lot of backstory on. I mean, we know more about Geese than we do of Zenith. Now, granted, again, we haven't really seen Ellie fight. We haven't seen Talhan fight, but of the main ones that we are the closest to the main cast, Zenith is the least one we know about.
That's
so
true.
I'm thinking it'd probably be Zenith's story.
That is honestly true. I mean,
because what did they say? They said They said something. No, who was it? Oh, was that Paul? They were talking about somebody leaving their home. It was something. I think it was Paul. I think Paul left his family. Yeah, they were talking about Paul leaving his family or when he was young, and he didn't want Rudy to have the same experience as him. So never mind, it's not Zenith. Sorry.
It's an interesting thought because, like I said, one of the things that one of Geese's decisions involves directly that party. So it's in some respects it's necessary, and in other respects it's one of those things that I wonder if it really is. What would it do to the overall story outside of it portraying a motivation later on? So if they end up bumping into like Zenith, for instance, if they bump into Zenith and they get some kind of a explanation of why she's making a decision that she's making, that might
seeing her act like not a mom.
Yeah, and give some kind of a reason why they need to go back into that backstory would make sense. So yeah, it because as it stands right now, everybody's character motivations technically are out in the open right now. Now, if they bump into Zenith and she randomly says, "I'm not going back to Paul," well, yeah, then technically we need some kind of a back explanation as to why she was with Paul if she technically doesn't like Paul anymore. So it would be interesting.
She's like, I'm taking Norn. Get out of here, Paul. I'm tired of you. I heard you got with the Bikini Warrior.
Well, if
I got your letter from Ghislaine that Ghislaine was yours. Something like that. Just something to throw it off a little bit more. But yeah. Good stuff though. I just every week I cannot wait for this series. I'm almost sad because technically we're 7 episodes into this, so we're over halfway done with the season already, which sucks. But we're getting I think we're getting 12 episodes of it, and an OVA apparently of Eris's goblin slaying escapades. Hopefully, Funimation gets that episode. I don't know. I don't think Funimation's very good at getting those OVAs though.
Once in a while, they definitely
they'll put them on disc.
It seems like they've been doing it a little bit more lately, especially the movies for sure.
I can't think of an example of them getting an OVA.
They do it occasionally. It's usually in between the two seasons. You'll go all the way to the end of a season, then it'll go to the next season, or it'll go into the OVAs. Yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know I just seen one recently that did that.
Probably maybe it was sell a Blu-ray.
I know that like for instance, maybe those were OVAs. The Demon Slayer did that.
They had a movie, yeah.
I know they had the movie. I think they had some OVAs in there too. But it's all in the thing. But yeah, they have done OVAs. I know for a fact they've done OVAs.
Yeah, that's Crunchyroll too, though. I'm not going to give Funimation credit for that one. I'm going to say Crunchyroll did that. Crunchyroll did it. Crunchyroll pulled it off. But yeah, excited for more. Definitely awesome. I really enjoyed going back through it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully got some insights in this. I at least felt a little bit good when I was struggling with certain information. Like I mentioned before, I totally forgot that the entire village was gone. And when I heard that they were looking for Lilia and Aisha, I'm like, oh wait, I totally forgot about that whole entire letter that explains that Paul lost everybody. He's looking for everybody. It felt like it was a decade ago that we had the first part. And so I had to, it was good to get a refresher on all that stuff. That was technically winter.
Yeah, you were still in California.
Yeah, that was winter. Winter was the first part, and then getting the second part in fall. Which does beg the question of like, when do you think they'll have the second season? Because they haven't announced it yet. I was mentioning it's got to be spring, but technically if you give it a 2-season gap again, that would be summer. And I remember seeing somewhere where technically summer is not a big viewership season, so usually most of the big shows are either in winter, spring, or fall. So I don't think they'll have it in summer. I hope they don't wait until next fall. Please don't wait until next fall. That would suck. But I'm hoping for spring, but as always, I would just hope they take as much time as they need because the quality they're turning out is fantastic, and I don't want them to suffer that at all. So good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, really my biggest flaw with this show is that when you're watching it, you get so absorbed in it, and then when those credits pop up, it's like it's over already. I'm mad. I want to start throwing TVs and smashing keyboards.
Yeah, it makes me almost want to just wait and just watch it all at once, but
right.
I enjoy watching each episode each week. I can't wait. So yeah, Eris is fantastic. I'm just really struggling because we've been away from Roxy for so long that Eris has really kind of ingrained herself in the head. But I did notice that when we got back to watching Roxy in this recent episode, I'm like, yeah, I miss Roxy.
We desperately need some Sylphy.
You need Sylphy?
We desperately need some Sylphy.
I'm not, interestingly enough, I'm not really craving that.
I understand, but we've gotten so much Eris and Roxy at this point. The only one that is left out and just hanging and dry is Sylphy.
We had more Sylphy than Aisha. Where's Aisha? Like, again, Aisha's gonna be like
I bet you Aisha's probably with Sylphy.
Technically, the ED spoils that, so I'm not gonna say anything. But what? Aisha, they literally spoil that in the ED.
I'm torn on
unless
this.
It's just faking
I have
it out.
This torn frustration of I almost want to go and watch the ED just to see what Andrew's talking about, and then at the same time I go, no, I don't want to watch the ED because
it's kind of one of those things that just like it doesn't give you a clear shot of everything, but it gives you a silhouettes of where everybody's at kind of thing. It is kind of what it's implying. But yeah, I think that with what's interesting, and we kind of talked about this earlier, is it's so funny how he's essentially building the harem without trying to build the harem. What does he have? He has a tsundere. He's got a childhood friend. He's got a maid. He's got a little sister. He's got like every single archetype, and he's got a big sister too with Ghislaine.
Yep.
He's got the big sister Ghislaine. He's got the little sister Norn. He's got the maid Aisha. He's got the childhood friend Sylphy. He's building and he's got the bromance going on with Ruijerd.
Wait until he gets the drunkard Oba-san with Ellie. One of Andrew's favorite archetypes.
I wonder what's going to happen there. Because technically he never met Ellie.
Right. He hasn't met her yet, but you know that's going to happen at some point.
Do you think it'll be one of those things where she's like, she walks into the room and Paul's there, she punches Paul, and then she sees Rudy and starts getting all over Rudy, like, oh my gosh, he's so handsome and cute.
You just watch.
I want him.
You just watch.
Like just to get back at Paul, she's gonna go after his son.
Just watch.
Oh man, that's something I really want to see.
And it's gonna throw him off. He's not gonna be able to do his pervy stuff with her because it's gonna be kind of like the opposite type things where it throws him off so much that he doesn't know what to do with it, and so I think
that's what it's going to be. I think he's literally going to be in shock, and I don't think he's going to run away from it, but I think it's going to be one of those things where he's like, oh wait, is this really happening? Is this really happening? And then somebody like Eris is going to come in and totally.
Yeah, you could probably do that.
Eris will always be the way of keeping him from getting seduced by Ellie. That's literally everybody.
Between her and Roxy. Yeah, I could see that.
I think what they've done with Eris is just absolutely fantastic. Like, she is literally tsundere done right. Like, it technically was played on as a joke early on, but over time, it's like they've done so well with creating a bond between the two of them. It's hard to ignore it. I think that, again, that's a lot to do with the fact that you've had so much time pass, is you see the characters grow and mature over time. It's almost funny watching where it all started with the first season, or at least the first part. I know, sorry.
We even have an overpowered demon girl.
Yeah, he technically has the demon lolly character, too. The demon lolly character that's actually 500 years old. Well, technically, Roxy was the lolly, legal lolly character because she was 44, but she looks like she's younger than that. I don't know. I don't really think that Roxy's in that territory of lolly, but I think, again, he technically seen her as that because he's, again, with the mind of a 34-year-old, seeing her being a lot younger than she actually is.
She kind of fits the kudere stereotype, and then you've got Sylphy would be more the dandere stereotype.
But what would Roxy, is Roxy just the young sensei? Yeah, I guess she's just a sensei character because he always looks up to her. He sees her as a sensei. And that was another thing that I forgot to mention, is like, I love that
there was such a bond created. Roxy, what I mentioned before, Sylphy, the progression of Rudy as a character over time is always like these little bumps. Like I said before, or the nudges. Sylphy was that, here's somebody he thought was a boy, talked with him for a little bit, realized it's a girl, but that opened the door for him to communicate with people outside of his comfort zone. And Roxy taught him, he said that he respects Roxy because even though she didn't intend on it, he pulled her out of that prison. He was stuck in that house, in that yard, and she essentially pulled him out to show him that he can leave and go forward. And it was that next nudge that he needed. Eris, obviously a big conflict, ends up pushing him forward a little more, even though he pervs out on her. Eventually, she kind of pushes him forward. Everybody pushes him forward in some way. And yeah, again, we got in the whole conversation about Paul and that acceptance that came from that. This is always about a story of that building of a character that I think is doing so great. I think it's helped by the fact that it's willing to do a long period of time with its storytelling and not feel stupid paced. Like, how can something that has gone from him being an infant to being 11 years old in 18 episodes not feel super rushed? It doesn't. It's so good. Anyways, I think that's it. I think we should stop. It's been long enough of a podcast episode. Really much enjoyed doing it. Like I said, I really wanted to I think most of this podcast was built around the idea of getting Chris's ideas on this recent season, because we haven't really got a chance to sit down and talk about his thoughts on a lot of this stuff. But he's been enjoying listening to my thoughts on the videos, and I've been enjoying giving my thoughts out, but everybody wants Chris's perspective. They don't want Andrew. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed this Jobless cast. Hopefully we didn't alienate too many of our listeners going, oh, I haven't watched Jobless, I can't listen to this episode. That's always my fear. But definitely enjoyed recording it. Definitely enjoyed talking. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, I immediately said, like, yeah, technically if you're listening to the video on YouTube, you can hit a like down below and subscribe and all that stuff. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and y'all take care.
Os.